My name's Ryan. I'm 32, and up until about 3 years ago, I thought I had a decent relationship with my family. Not perfect, definitely not close, but functional. We had our holidays, the occasional birthday get-together, and the expected flurry of group texts around Christmas. Nothing too deep. We weren't the kind of family that shared emotions or asked real questions. Everything stayed surface level. Jobs, weather, sports, who's bringing what to Thanksgiving. And honestly, I was fine with that. I'm the youngest of 3. My brother Tyler is the oldest, lives across the country, has a family of his own, shows up when he has to, and otherwise stays out of the drama. Then there's my sister, Courtney. 3 years older than me, golden child, everyone's favorite, and completely oblivious to how much damage she leaves behind when she decides she's the main character. Growing up, she always got away with everything. She'd lie, cry, throw fits, play the victim, and somehow come out of every situation looking like the one who was wronged. Meanwhile, I got branded the moody one, the quiet one, the one who needs to open up more. And maybe that's true. I've never been loud, never been good at arguing my side in the moment. I always just took it, then went to my room and stewed in silence. My parents, well, they didn't help. Mom is the textbook definition of a peacekeeper. Thinks everything can be fixed with a hug and a cup of tea. Conflict makes her short-circuit. Dad is more blunt. Doesn't yell, but his disappointment is like a slow poison. He's never once said he was proud of me. Not even when I got promoted, not when I bought my first home, not when I got through a rough breakup and still showed up to every family event with a smile on my face. But Courtney? She could say the word anxiety and get coddled for a month. I'm not exaggerating. She cried during Christmas once because someone made a joke about her burnt cookies, and suddenly Mom was banning sarcasm from family gatherings. Like we were supposed to pretend nothing was ever wrong. For years, I let it slide. That's what you do with family, right? You bite your tongue. You tell yourself they mean well. You ignore the little slights because that's just how they are. I thought I could live with that arrangement. Until the day Courtney's marriage blew up, and she made me her scapegoat in a way that blindsided me so hard. I still replay it sometimes, trying to figure out if I missed something earlier. If there were signs. If I could have stopped it. But before we get to that explosion, I need to go back to the smaller things. The things that chipped away at me over the years until there was nothing left to hold on to. Because the truth is, families don't break apart in one day. They crack. Slowly. Quietly. And it starts with stuff no one else notices. Like the time I brought my girlfriend to Thanksgiving, and Courtney introduced herself by saying, "Oh, you're with Ryan? That's cute. Not nice to meet you. Not welcome." Just that smug little smirk and the implication that dating me was some sort of charity project. Or the time I graduated college with honors, and at the dinner afterward, Courtney spent 20 minutes talking about how she almost went back for her master's, but just didn't feel stimulated by academia. No one asked her. No one brought it up. But somehow the conversation still became hers. I sat there picking at my salad while Dad nodded like she'd just cured something. Then there was the baby shower. Hers, obviously. A big event. She wanted it at Mom and Dad's house, and I helped set everything up. The tables, the decorations, the food, even the stupid balloon art she found on Pinterest. I didn't complain. I never do. But when she stood up to do her little speech, thanking everyone, she skipped over me entirely. Thanked her husband, her best friend, even her college roommate who showed up an hour late and left before gifts. But me? Not a word. When I asked her about it later, just to clear the air, she blinked at me like I was speaking another language and said, "Oh, don't be so sensitive. I didn't think you'd care." That line, "I didn't think you'd care." That's Courtney in a nutshell. She does whatever she wants, says whatever she wants, and if it hurts you, well, that's your fault for caring. She's emotional. She's stressed. She didn't mean it. And somehow, everyone always buys it. Mom pats her back. Dad changes the subject. Tyler shrugs and says, "That's just Court being Court." By the time she got married, I was already starting to feel like an outsider in my own family. Not on the surface. We still had dinners and birthday cakes and group photos. But inside, I was done trying. Done fighting for space in a house that never made room for me. I showed up, smiled when I had to, and left early when I could. Then came the night it all started to unravel. Her marriage was only 2 years in at that point, but something had shifted. At family gatherings, her husband, Sean, looked tired. Like really tired. The kind of tired that doesn't come from work or sleepless baby nights, but from walking on eggshells for too long. He barely spoke, and when he did, Courtney would cut him off or correct him in that same sing-song voice she used when we were kids, like he was just a misbehaving student in her classroom. At first, I thought maybe they were just going through something. I kept my head down, stayed out of it. But Sean started pulling me aside more often, asking about work, my car, the weather, random stuff, just to talk. One time, he asked me what kind of music I liked, and when I answered, he said, "Thanks." No one's asked me a real question in weeks. I didn't know what to say to that. That summer, Mom organized a 4th of July barbecue. Everyone was there, extended family, friends, neighbors. Courtney and Sean showed up late, and she was already in a mood. Something about the heat, the traffic, the fact that we hadn't saved her a good chair. Sean trailed behind her like a ghost, holding the diaper bag and trying not to drop anything. The night was tense. You know when everyone's smiling, but nothing feels right? That was the vibe. Courtney snapped at Sean 3 times before dinner. Once because he forgot to bring the pacifier, once because he used the wrong fork to serve salad, and once, loudly, because he interrupted her while she was telling a story about work. I should have stepped in, said something, but I didn't. I never do. Later that evening, after most people had gone home and the leftover burgers were cold, Courtney cornered me by the garage. She had that look, eyes wide, lips tight, like she was winding up for something. "You know," she said, "you could try being more supportive." I blinked. Supportive of what? Of me. Of my marriage. "Sean says you've been weird with him lately. Like cold." That was a lie. Sean had literally just asked me about my favorite hiking trails. But I didn't call her out. I just said, I didn't know there was an issue. She rolled her eyes. "You never know anything. That's the problem. You just sit there and judge everyone like you're above it all. But you're not, Ryan. You're not." And then she walked away. I didn't bring it up to anyone. Just went home, sat in my car, and stared at the dashboard for a full 10 minutes. I felt like I'd been sucker punched by someone who hadn't even swung. I didn't understand why she was mad or what I'd done, only that somehow it was my fault again, and that no one would believe me if I said otherwise. It wasn't the last time she pulled something like that, but it was the first time I started seriously asking myself, what if she's not just dramatic? What if she's dangerous? What if all those years of slights and jabs and guilt trips weren't just accidental? What if she knows exactly what she's doing? I didn't have an answer then, but I'd get one. Soon. The breaking point didn't come all at once. It never does. It came in pieces, like little shards of glass that don't hurt right away, but start to sting once you realize you're bleeding. And by the time I noticed, I was cut open in places I didn't even know were exposed. After that July cookout, things got worse. Subtler, in a way, but worse. Courtney stopped inviting me to things directly. Family dinners, birthday parties, even my niece's baptism. I'd only hear about them secondhand through Mom. Always with a last-minute text that sounded more like a formality than an actual invitation. "Hey Ree, not sure if you're free, but we're doing a little something for Emma on Sunday." No pressure though. No pressure. Right. Every time I showed up, I felt like I'd walked into a room halfway through a conversation I wasn't supposed to hear. Everyone acted normal on the surface, smiles, small talk, paper plates with too much potato salad. But underneath it all, I could feel it. The distance. The way people looked at me just a beat too long. The way conversations would pause when I walked in and resume in a different tone once I sat down. And Sean, he'd all but disappeared into himself. He used to make an effort. He'd crack a joke, offer me a drink, talk about football. But now he barely made eye contact. He just stayed close to Courtney, did what she told him, and laughed too hard at her stories. At first, I assumed he'd chosen her side. I mean, of course he had. He was married to her. But something about the way he moved felt off. Like he was performing. Like he was being watched even when no one was watching. It wasn't until Emma's 3rd birthday party that things came to a head. It was held at a rented space. One of those indoor play centers with foam pits, slides, and overpriced pizza. I brought a thoughtful gift, a custom picture book with Emma's name in the story. I even wrote a note inside the front cover. But when I handed it to Courtney, she barely glanced at it before passing it off to one of her friends with a tight smile. "Oh, that's sweet. Thanks," she said. Then she turned back to her phone. I stood there like an idiot for a few seconds, thinking she'd say something else. She didn't. Later, During cake, she made a toast to everyone who's really been there for us this year. She thanked her in-laws, her co-workers, her best friend. Hell, even her neighbor who once babysat in a pinch. But me? Nothing. Not even a nod. I didn't say a word. I just smiled, clapped, and left early. The next day, I got a voicemail from Mom. "Hey, sweetheart, Courtney said you seemed a little off at the party yesterday. She's worried about you. I think maybe you should call her. Clear the air." Clear the air. Like I was a storm cloud ruining her perfect sky. I didn't call. A month passed. Then another. The silence stretched. No one reached out, and I didn't either. I was tired of being the one to fix things when I hadn't broken them. Tired of having to tiptoe around my sister's moods like they were sacred relics. Then came the bombshell. It was Christmas Eve. We were all at my parents' house, doing the usual awkward gift exchange. Courtney was on edge. I could tell the moment she walked in. Her jaw was tight, her smile too wide. Sean looked even worse. Pale, twitchy, like he'd had too much caffeine and not enough sleep. Presents were opened. Small talk was made. I gave my parents a framed photo from their wedding day that I'd restored and printed. They teared up. Courtney gave them matching wine glasses with her daughter's face etched on them. "They're so cute, right?" she beamed. I figured we could all drink from them during Emma's birthday toast next month. I was about to ask if I was invited, sarcastically, of course, but I bit my tongue. Then Courtney stood up. "I actually wanted to say something," she said, clinking her glass. "Just a quick note of appreciation." Here we go, I thought. But she didn't thank anyone. She looked at me, and what she said next will stay with me until the day I die. "You know," she began, her voice trembling slightly, "this year's been really hard for me. Sean and I have been going through things, and I've done a lot of thinking. About family, about support, about honesty." I felt everyone's eyes shift toward her, then toward me. My stomach tightened. "And I think it's time to stop pretending everything's okay," she said, tears suddenly welling up. "Because the truth is, I wouldn't be in this situation if Ryan hadn't inserted himself into my marriage." A pause. Silence. My heart dropped. "I didn't want to say anything before," she went on, sniffing dramatically. "But you all deserve to know. Ryan's the reason Sean and I are separating. He's the reason my husband left me." There was a sharp intake of breath. Mom's, I think. Dad looked confused. Tyler blinked like he couldn't process what he'd just heard. I stood up slowly. "What are you talking about?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Courtney turned to me with a look that could curdle milk. "Don't pretend. You've been poisoning him against me for months. You act all quiet and innocent, but I know what you've been doing. The little comments, the texts, the manipulation. He told me everything, Ryan." Sean didn't say a word. Not one. He just stared at the floor like a child caught in the middle of a custody battle. "Are you serious?" I asked louder now. "What comments? What manipulation?" "I trusted you," she cried, wiping a perfectly dry cheek. "I trusted you with my family, and you undermined me. I'm done pretending you're a good person." I looked at my parents. At Tyler. At Sean. No one said anything. That's what killed me the most. Not Courtney's lies. Not her crocodile tears. But the fact that in that moment, when I was being publicly gutted by my sister, no one stood up for me. No one asked for proof. No one said, "Wait, this doesn't sound like Ryan." They just sat there, watching, waiting. I left before dessert. No one stopped me. No one called after. Not that night. Not the next day. I spent Christmas alone for the first time in my life. The silence afterward was deafening. No one texted. Not even Tyler. Not even Mom. I checked in once, out of habit. Sent a short message. "Can we talk?" Mom responded 3 days later. "I think it's best we all take some time to cool off." Cool off. Like I'd started a fire by existing. From that point on, I was cut off. No invites. No updates. Nothing. I became the family pariah overnight, thanks to one unhinged accusation that no one even tried to verify. And Sean, gone. Moved out. Blocked me on everything. I didn't even get a chance to ask him what the hell had happened. I spiraled for a bit. Wondered if I had done something wrong. If I'd somehow made Sean uncomfortable. If maybe my quiet presence had been interpreted as judgment. I replayed every conversation, every gathering, every look. But there was nothing. Nothing to justify what Courtney did. It was like she'd been waiting for an excuse to burn me alive. And then, months later, when I'd started to forget the sound of their voices, I got an email. From Sean. The subject line read, "She lied about everything." And when I opened it, well, let's just say everything changed. The email sat in my inbox for 6 days before I opened it. Not because I didn't want to know. Trust me, I wanted to know more than anything. But something in me was afraid that whatever was in that message would finally confirm what I'd been trying not to accept, that the people I'd loved my whole life, the ones I bent myself backward for, had already decided who I was without ever asking me. That email felt like a door, and once I opened it, there'd be no going back. So I stared at it for almost a week. Every day, I'd hover over the subject line. She lied about everything. 5 words, 1 sentence, a promise and a threat wrapped in pixels. When I finally clicked it open, it wasn't dramatic. It wasn't some long manifesto from Sean or a voice recording with a tearful confession. It was 3 paragraphs. Plain. Tired. It read, "Hey Ryan, I'm sorry it's taken me this long to reach out. I owe you a massive apology. You didn't deserve what happened at Christmas. You never said anything about Courtney. You never interfered. She made all that up. I left because of her, not you. There's a lot more to say, and I understand if you don't want to hear it. But I thought you should at least know the truth. I see now how isolated you must have felt for years. I'm so sorry I didn't say something sooner. Sean." I read it 6 times. Then I sat in the dark and cried harder than I have in my adult life. It wasn't even about vindication. It was the sudden release of carrying the weight of something I hadn't done, being punished like I was guilty, talked about like I was toxic, discarded like I was disposable. All for nothing. No apology from Courtney. No message from my parents. But Sean had finally confirmed what I'd felt for months but couldn't prove. That she made it up. That she'd weaponized her own divorce to destroy me. That I was right to feel what I felt. But here's the part that really broke me. It didn't change anything. Not immediately, anyway. Even with that email, I still had no family. I still wasn't invited to Easter. I still didn't get a single happy birthday text. I could have printed Sean's message and mailed it to every relative I had. But what would that do? People believe what they want to believe. And my family had made their choice. They'd rather live in Courtney's world than face what she actually is. So yeah, I hit bottom. For a while, I stopped going out. Stopped responding to texts from friends. I barely went to work. I was remote anyway, so no one really noticed. I ordered takeout, let laundry pile up, slept until noon, stared at the wall. Everything felt heavy and pointless. I'd lost more than my sister. I'd lost my history, my childhood, the context of who I was. Because when your family turns on you, it doesn't just hurt in the present, it warps the past. Suddenly you start wondering, were all those years of smiles just fake? Were the birthday cards signed with love because they meant it? Or because that's what you're supposed to do? Did they ever really know me? And if the answer's no, then who am I really? It took time. And I don't mean that as some tidy resolution. It wasn't a movie montage with upbeat music and quick cuts of me jogging, cleaning the apartment, and making smoothies. It was slow, messy, uncomfortable. But here's the thing about rock bottom. It's quiet. No one's watching. No one's waiting for you to perform. And in that silence, I finally started asking myself questions I'd never dared to ask. What do I actually want? What kind of life am I building? Who do I become if I stop trying to please people who don't care if I exist? I started small. Therapy. That was the first real step. I'd always brushed off therapy like it was for people with real problems. But now I had a gaping hole in the middle of my chest and no idea how to patch it. So I booked a session. Then another. Then another. I talked about Courtney. About the years of quiet humiliation. About being the background character in my own family. About the email. About how guilty I still felt, even though I knew I hadn't done anything wrong. My therapist, Marla, never once told me what to do. She just kept asking questions. Pushing. Digging. Helping me connect dots I'd never seen before. Like how I always downplayed my own needs because, growing up, the only way to survive was to avoid becoming a problem. Or how I over-explained everything because I'd been trained to defend myself before I was even accused. It was exhausting, but freeing. At the same time, I started spending more time on things that I actually liked, just for me. I went back to hiking, bought a decent camera, and started taking photos. Nature became my escape. Quiet, neutral, forgiving. No sides to take. No lies. Just sky and rock and dirt and wind. I also picked up freelance work, small web design projects, helping small businesses with branding, even writing copy for online stores. It gave me something to pour into. something that didn't depend on anyone else's approval. Funny enough, that little side hustle started to grow. Within 6 months, I had more clients than I could manage alone. I left my corporate job, launched my own branding consultancy, built a clean, modern site, got referrals, started charging real rates. I worked out of coffee shops, wore sweatpants, made my own schedule, and for the first time in my life, I felt free. Not in a dramatic, burn everything down kind of way, but in a quiet, steady kind of way. I was living on my terms. No family dinners to navigate. No Courtney to dodge. No need to explain myself to anyone who already decided I wasn't worth hearing. I even started dating again, carefully, slowly. I met someone named Eliza through a hiking group. She was sharp, funny, incredibly observant. The kind of person who notices when someone needs space, but also knows when to gently nudge them out of it. We talked about everything, eventually, even my family. And when I told her the whole Courtney situation, she didn't try to fix it. She didn't say, "But they're your family." She just said, "That sounds awful. I'm sorry you went through that." I didn't realize how much I needed to hear that until I did. Around that time, Sean sent me another message. Longer this time. He explained that Courtney had been unraveling since the moment they had their daughter, that she'd accused multiple people of turning him against her, that she lied constantly, about little things, then big things, about who said what, about how people treated her, always playing the victim, always rewriting reality so she came out on top. She can't handle accountability, he wrote, so she twists everything until it's someone else's fault. That was the moment it clicked. She didn't just lie about me because she hated me. She lied because she needed to. In her world, there always has to be a villain. And the only thing more convenient than making her husband the bad guy was making me the mastermind behind it. It wasn't personal. And yet it was. Because I was the easy target. The quiet one. The one who wouldn't fight back. Until now. I didn't respond to Sean's second message right away. I let it sit. I wasn't sure what I wanted to say, or if I wanted to say anything at all. But eventually, I did write back. Not to argue. Not to ask questions. Just this. Thanks for telling me. I appreciate the honesty. It matters. And then I did something I never thought I'd do. I forwarded the original email, the one with the subject line "She lied about everything," to someone else. One person. My brother, Tyler. No explanation. Just the email. He didn't reply that day. Or the next. And for a while, I figured maybe he was like the rest. Maybe it was easier for him to pretend the lie never happened. But then, a week later, my phone rang. It was Tyler. And what he said changed everything. When Tyler called, I didn't answer on the first ring. Or the second. I stared at my phone like it was some kind of mirage, like my brother's name showing up on the screen was part of a weird dream I hadn't finished yet. After everything, the silence, the abandonment, the absence of even a single "you okay?" text. Why now? But I answered. Because even after all that, a small, stupid part of me still hoped he might have finally seen the truth. "Hey," I said. There was a pause. Not an awkward one. More like the wait before impact kind. Then he sighed and said, "I read the email." I didn't respond. Not yet. I had a feeling, he added. For a while now. I just didn't want to deal with it. Still, I said nothing. I wasn't going to make this easy for him. "I'm not going to pretend like I handled it well," he continued. "I should have reached out. I should have asked you what really happened. I was just tired, man. Tired of the drama. I figured, if I stayed out of it, it'd blow over." "And you figured it was easier to let me take the hit," I said quietly. There was another pause. "Yeah," he admitted. "I did." That honesty hit harder than any fake apology ever could have. And somehow, it softened me, just a little. "So now what?" I asked. "You want to pretend nothing happened? Or are you calling because you actually want to do something about it?" He let out a long breath. "I want to fix it. If I can." I didn't trust him. Not fully. But I also didn't hang up. Because after months of silence, someone was finally cracking the narrative Courtney had built around me like armor. And I wasn't going to waste the opportunity. We talked for an hour that night. Tyler filled in some blanks I hadn't even known were missing. Apparently, after Sean left, Courtney spun a whole new version of the story. She told my parents I'd been emotionally manipulative, that I'd fed Sean lies to create division in her marriage. She claimed I'd been secretly bitter and jealous for years, that I hated seeing her happy, that I'd always resented her role in the family and wanted to ruin what she had. And they believed her. Because why wouldn't they? I'd always been quiet, detached, the odd one out. It wasn't a stretch for them to imagine I'd turned cold and vindictive. But now, with Sean's email, Tyler couldn't ignore the cracks anymore. "She's spiraling," he said. "She's not the same person she used to be. Or maybe she is, and I just didn't want to see it." It didn't feel like enough. But it was something. And something was all I needed to get started. Because that conversation, the rawness, the honesty, lit something in me that had been dormant for far too long. I didn't want to be vindicated quietly anymore. I wanted them all to see what they'd done. And more importantly, I wanted them to feel it. That's when I started planning. Not out of spite. Not out of some cartoonish desire to get revenge. But because for the first time in my life, I was done playing defense. I was going to hit back. Smartly. Quietly. And with receipts. The first thing I did was start documenting everything. I compiled every message I had from Sean. I went back through old texts, emails, photos, anything that showed my history with Courtney and the rest of the family. Moments of her undermining me, of me being there for her. Evidence that I had always shown up, always stayed neutral, always been the peacekeeper. Then I started reaching out to people. Not mom or dad. Not yet. I went to the fringe first. Aunt Linda, mom's sister. Always kind to me. Never fully bought into Courtney's dramatics. Uncle James, dad's cousin. Big on family unity, but also the kind of guy who respected facts. Even a couple of old family friends who'd been around long enough to see how things really played out. I didn't send long, angry rants. I sent Sean's email. Simple. Clean. Followed by, "I'm sharing this because the version of me that's been circulating in the family isn't real. I didn't ask for this drama, but I'm done pretending I'm okay with how I've been treated. This is the truth. Do with it what you will." And the responses? They started pouring in. Some were awkward, some apologetic, some shocked. But most of them had the same tone. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I wish I'd reached out sooner." They started talking amongst themselves. I knew that because a few of them circled back to me with updates. Apparently, Aunt Linda confronted my mom. Asked her outright if she'd seen the email. Mom said no. Courtney had convinced her it was faked. Sean's actual words, according to Aunt Linda, were dismissed as probably manipulated by Ryan. I wanted to scream. But instead, I got strategic. If Courtney was going to claim the email was fake, I needed proof it wasn't. So I called Sean. He answered on the third ring. I didn't even bother with small talk. "She's saying the email's fake," I said. He sighed. "Of course she is. Can you confirm it's real? In writing?" There was a pause. Then, "Yeah, I'll send a signed statement. With the date, my contact info, everything." And he did. That same night. A short letter, half a page. But it was bulletproof. It stated clearly that the original email came from him, unedited, and that everything he wrote in it was true. He also added a few new details, like how Courtney used to snoop through his phone, delete messages, and then accuse him of hiding things. He said she had a pattern of weaponizing emotions to isolate people. I attached the statement to a follow-up message. And this time, I sent it to my parents. No introduction. No pleading. Just the PDF. And then I waited. Days passed. No response. I wasn't surprised. But it still burned. Tyler texted me 3 days later. They saw it. Dad's upset. Mom's crying a lot. Courtney's doubling down. I asked if they'd said anything about me. He replied, "Not yet. But I think they're starting to wonder." Good. That was all I needed. Because I wasn't done. Courtney's narrative had worked because it was sealed in a bubble. She controlled the air. Controlled the version of events that circulated within our family. But what happens when that bubble pops? When the people she needs the most, the ones she uses as mirrors, start questioning her reflection. That's when I got the idea for the final piece of my setup. Something public. Not dramatic. Not cruel. Just honest. I started writing a letter. An open letter. Addressed to no one, but written as if everyone I grew up with would read it. I kept it calm. Measured. I didn't insult Courtney or call her names. I didn't rant. I just laid out the timeline. What happened at Christmas? The accusations. The fallout. The email. The proof. And then I ended it with a paragraph that took me 2 hours to write. If you believed her, I don't blame you. I was quiet. I let things slide. I didn't correct the record when I should have. But that doesn't make her story true. It just means I was too tired to fight back. Until now. If you've already decided who I am, that's your right. But I won't keep apologizing for things I didn't do. I won't sit quietly while someone else rewrites my story. Not anymore. I posted it on my personal blog. then linked to it on my social media. I hadn't posted anything in months, maybe a year. So when that notification went out, people clicked. They read it. And they shared it. Not thousands of times. I'm not famous. But enough. Enough that it reached extended family, distant cousins, high school friends, even a few coworkers from years back who remembered seeing Courtney at office holiday parties. The ripple was small, but it was steady. And then, one night, I got a text from an unknown number. It was a screenshot. A message from Courtney to someone named Rachel, a mutual cousin. In it, she ranted, "He's trying to make me look crazy. He's manipulating people again. This is exactly what he did to Sean." And that was all the confirmation I needed. She wasn't sorry. She wasn't scared. She was losing control. And Courtney without control? That's when the cracks start to show. And I had every intention of watching them widen. Because the setup was complete. The pieces were in place. All I needed now was the right moment to pull the trigger. The opportunity came faster than I expected. 3 weeks after I published my open letter and forwarded Sean's email to my parents, Courtney made the one mistake narcissists always make. She overplayed her hand. See, she'd been controlling the family narrative for so long that she assumed she still had the same power. She thought everyone still believed every word she said, or at the very least, feared calling her out. But the email, the open letter, my silence, it unsettled her. She couldn't figure out my next move, and that scared her more than anything. So she went on the offensive. Courtney threw herself a pity party. A real one. She called it Emma's Healing Weekend. But it was all about her. She rented out a local lodge and invited a bunch of extended family, claiming it was a supportive family bonding event after a traumatic divorce. Tyler called me 2 days before and said, "She's trying to get ahead of something. She's scared." "Good. Are you going?" I asked. "Yeah. I need to see what she says," he replied. "You?" I smiled, even though he couldn't see it. "Oh, I'll be there. But not how she expects." See, while Courtney was planning her emotional PR weekend, I was finalizing something of my own. I'd hired a lawyer. Not to sue. Not yet. But to write a formal cease and desist letter, just in case she ever repeated the lie that I was the reason Sean left. Slander is slander. And with Sean's written statement, I had leverage. But I wasn't planning to send it. At least, not unless I needed to. Instead, I had a better idea. One that involved a different kind of public record. At Emma's Healing Weekend, Courtney stood in front of the fire pit with her arms wide like some grief-soaked prophet, talking about how betrayal comes from the people you love most, and not all wounds are visible. My cousin Rachel recorded the whole thing on her phone and sent it to me, along with the group chat Courtney had created titled Family Reclaiming Joy. I waited until the weekend was over. Then I struck. The following Monday, I drafted an email to every single person who'd attended. Subject line: "Before you accept her story, read this." The body of the email was short, measured. "Hi everyone. I hope you're all doing okay after the weekend. I wasn't invited, but I heard it was quite the emotional event. Before you walk away thinking you know what really happened between Courtney and me, or between Courtney and Sean, I thought it might be time to share the full picture. Attached is a verified statement from Sean himself, along with my own account of what happened. These aren't opinions. These are facts. No drama. Just the truth. You don't have to respond. You don't have to choose sides. But if you're going to believe someone, I'd prefer it be based on actual events, not just performance. Ryan." And I attached everything. The original email, Sean's signed statement, a link to the blog post, screenshots of text between Courtney and me that showed how calm I'd been, even when she was at her worst. I hit send. The fallout hit like a storm. Rachel texted me first. "Oh my God. People are losing it. She told everyone you harassed Sean." Aunt Linda called the next morning. Her voice was shaking. "Ryan, I didn't know. I truly didn't know. She lied right to my face." Then Tyler. She flipped out. Full meltdown. She said you hacked Sean's email and fabricated the statement. Dad asked her to show proof. She couldn't. I imagined that scene and let myself smile, just a little. "She screamed at Mom," he added. "Said if she didn't take her side, she'd cut her off completely." "And Mom?" I asked. A pause. She didn't say anything. She just left the room. That told me everything I needed to know. The next part was quiet. Slower. I didn't need to yell. I didn't need to make a scene. I let my silence speak for me. One by one, people started reaching out. A few relatives apologized outright. Some said they were ashamed they hadn't questioned her sooner. A few tried to play neutral. I let them. I wasn't looking to rebuild what we had. That bridge was burned. But what I did want? Accountability. And I got it. 2 weeks after the email, Dad called me. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail. Ryan. I read everything. He paused, then cleared his throat. I'm sorry. I should have asked you for your side. I should have been better. Your sister's not well. We see that now. I didn't call him back, but I saved the voicemail, just in case. The final blow came when Sean did something I hadn't asked for, didn't expect, and will never forget. He posted his statement publicly, on his own social media. No tags, no drama, just, there's been a lot of confusion and misinformation about why my marriage ended. I kept quiet out of respect, but I've decided to clarify. Ryan had nothing to do with it. He never interfered, never manipulated me. The choices I made were mine. The reasons I left were personal and deeply related to my own experiences in the marriage. I apologize to anyone who believed otherwise. You were misled, and Ryan deserves better. And with that, the final thread Courtney had been clinging to snapped. She couldn't scream that I was behind it. Because this time, Sean had spoken. Openly. Permanently. The narrative collapsed. Family members distanced themselves. Some stopped talking to her entirely. She tried one last stunt, posted a tearful video about being betrayed by blood, said she was being ganged up on by toxic male energy. But the comments weren't buying it anymore. Even her old defenders were quiet, because deep down, they knew. She'd built her castle on lies, and now the foundation had crumbled. As for me, I didn't celebrate. Not loudly. But one evening, I hiked up to my favorite spot, an overlook with a wide view of the valley below, and sat there until the sun dipped behind the hills. No music, no phone, no noise, just the wind, and the knowledge that for the first time in my life, I wasn't carrying a weight that didn't belong to me. I wasn't the villain in someone else's play. I wasn't the scapegoat. I wasn't invisible. I had stood up, told the truth, and watched the truth do what it always does. It didn't roar. It didn't need to. It whispered, and the world listened. She wanted to ruin my name. I gave her the chance. She ruined her own. My name's Elias. I'm 27, and I've always been the quiet one in my family. Not the black sheep exactly, but not exactly included. Growing up, I learned early that silence was safer. My parents, especially my mom, had a way of rewriting history if you argued. If you were upset, you were moody. If you disagreed, you were ungrateful. So I adapted. I let my brother, Jonah, golden boy, charming, always on, shine. I let my younger twin sisters, Mia and Grace, take center stage. And I stayed in the background, helping where I could, but never loud enough to be seen. Until last month, I didn't think much about it. Not until I walked into the kitchen and saw the itinerary. It was sitting on the printer tray, slightly curled at the edge like it had just finished printing. My name wasn't on it. 5 airline tickets. Round trip to Santorini. 3 hotel rooms. 1 week. My family's dream vacation. The one we'd been talking about for over a year. The one I helped plan. I paid the €11,300 deposit on my app because I was the only one with enough credit at the time. I didn't even hesitate. They promised to pay me back. Mom said, just book it, Eli. We'll settle everything after your dad's bonus comes in. But there it was, in black and white, 5 names. Mom, Dad, Jonah, Mia, Grace. Not me. At first, I genuinely thought it was a mistake. A technical glitch. I mean, I'd sent the booking link. I'd picked the rooms. I'd even arranged the airport transport. There was no way they forgot me. I snapped a photo of the itinerary and sent it to the family group chat. No caption. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. At the 15-minute mark, Mom finally replied. We thought you backed out. You've been so moody lately, honey. That was it. No apology. No, oh my God, what? No, let me check. Maybe there was a mix-up. Just passive-aggressive emotional deflection, like always. As if this was somehow my fault. I didn't respond. Not immediately. I just sat there at the kitchen table, phone in hand, blinking. The fridge was humming. The air was still. And the longer I stared at that text, the more it all started clicking into place. The side comments at dinner the week before. Well, if you even come, Jonah had said, laughing. Grace had asked, do you even like beaches? Mia mentioned how it might be nice to just have a trip without any tension for once. I'd assumed they were just being their usual selves. Turns out, they were prepping for something bigger. Still, I wanted to be wrong. I told myself maybe they had another booking under my name. Maybe a surprise. Maybe, God knows why, I was overreacting. I texted Dad. Hey, did you mean to leave me off the itinerary? No reply. Send a second message. Can you check your email for the booking confirmation? Nothing. An hour passed. Then, right as I was closing my laptop, a voice note popped up on my phone. Jonah. I could tell it wasn't meant for me because the first thing he said was, "Bro, you should have seen Mom's face when she hit send." She was like, "He's gonna flip when he sees the photos." Then a laugh. "It's about time we had a real vacation, man. Just us." Then another voice, maybe Mia's. "He's probably sulking right now. You know how he gets." I stared at the waveform bouncing on my screen. The air knocked out of me like someone had slammed a door on my chest. That wasn't a mistake. That wasn't a miscommunication. That was intentional. I didn't even realize I'd been holding my breath. I tapped the mic and replied, "Enjoy." Then I opened my travel app. Everything was still there. The hotel booking, the flight confirmation, the paid invoices. All under my account. My credit card. My name. I hadn't transferred the bookings yet. I'd planned to finalize the split this week, after we'd firmed up the meal add-ons. I was supposed to send them their individual confirmation numbers today. Instead, I hit cancel. The app prompted me. "Are you sure you want to cancel all 6 reservations? This action cannot be undone." I clicked yes. Room by room. Ticket by ticket. The hotel sent an email confirmation within minutes. So did the airline. The full cancellation amount was returned to my account within seconds. Thankfully, refundable packages. All that remained was silence. Until 6:41 a.m. the next morning. My phone lit up like a Christmas tree. 102 missed calls. The first one was from Mom. The second from Dad. Then Jonah. Then Mia. Then Grace. A few from unknown numbers. Likely the airport driver or some frantic concierge. My notifications were a scroll of chaos. Voicemails. Texts. Panicked emojis. Some angry, some confused. And then another voice note. From Mom this time. Her voice sharp, on the verge of cracking. "Elias, what did you do? We're stranded. The hotel says there's no record of our booking. The airline says the tickets were refunded. What are you thinking? Call me now." I didn't. Instead, I sat up in bed, turned my phone on silent, and looked out the window. The sky was still dark, quiet, peaceful, and for the first time in what felt like years, so was I. Because what they didn't know, what they never bothered to ask, was that I had made a second reservation. Just one room, one ticket, same dates, same destination. Except this time, the name on the itinerary was mine, and mine alone. And that's when my doorbell rang. I froze. The doorbell wasn't aggressive, not pounding, just persistent. Like whoever it was had no intention of leaving. My mind raced. Had someone driven back from the airport? Was it Jonah? He lived closest. Or maybe Mom sent a neighbor over, some kind of guilt-laced ambush. My heart thudded once, then again, heavier. I tucked my phone under my pillow and stood quietly by the bedroom door, listening. Nothing. Then the chime again. 2 short presses this time. I crept down the hallway, not breathing. I peered through the peephole. It was Leo. Not family. A friend. My only real friend. He held up 2 paper coffee cups and raised an eyebrow. I opened the door. "You look like you haven't slept," he said, stepping inside. "I brought the good stuff." "Why are you here?" I asked, still trying to connect reality to everything in my head. He handed me a coffee and sat down on the edge of my couch. "Your mom called mine," he said simply. "Something about a family emergency at the airport and needing someone to talk sense into you. My mom knows better. She just gave me the message." I laughed, but it didn't feel funny. It felt like someone else's laugh. Of course she did. Leo looked at me for a second, his eyes scanning. "So, what happened?" I didn't answer right away. I took a sip instead. I didn't need to tell him everything. He'd seen enough over the years. The family vacations I was too busy to attend, the birthdays they forgot, the Christmas photos I took instead of being in. But I told him anyway. About the printed itinerary, the missing name, the voice note, the cancellation. He listened, quiet, not even interrupting when I paused for too long. When I finally finished, he leaned back and let out a low whistle. "They really left you out on purpose." "That's cold." "Yeah," I said. "But you know what's worse?" "What?" "They weren't going to tell me. They were going to let me find out through photos." He shook his head slowly, like he was still trying to wrap his head around it. So what now? I picked up my phone and opened my email. Now? Now I go to Santorini. Leo raised a brow. You're still going? Why not? I already paid for it. And it's refundable. Well, was. I rebooked. Just one room. Just me. Damn, he said, then smirked. You're going to be sipping espresso by the beach while they're stuck at the terminal yelling at each other. I shrugged. Let them. Maybe they'll figure out how to be a family without someone holding it all together. I tapped my phone, scrolling through the unread messages. Mom had sent 4 more voice notes. One of them started with, Elias, be reasonable, and I didn't bother playing the rest. Jonah had written in all caps, dude, what is wrong with you? And Grace, my sweet, manipulative sister, had gone full melodrama. We thought we'd surprise you. You were going to be the big reveal. Why would you do this to us? The big reveal? Sure. If the reveal was a group photo captioned, wish you were here. Leo noticed my expression. You okay? I'm not mad, I said. That's the scary part. I thought I'd be furious. I thought I'd throw something or scream or, I don't know, do something dramatic. But I'm just done. I don't care what excuse they give. Because there's nothing left to say, he replied, nodding. Exactly. By 9 a.m., the calls slowed. The rage had probably turned to damage control. I imagined them frantically trying to rebook flights, realizing the summer season prices had doubled. I imagined Mom blaming Dad. Dad yelling at Jonah. Grace crying about her ruined vacation. Mia calling me selfish. The same old cycle. This time, I wasn't in it. Around noon, I packed. I didn't overthink it. Just a suitcase, my passport, sunglasses, and the bare essentials. I left a note for my neighbor to water the plants. Booked a ride to the airport. Texted Leo a quick thanks. And he gave me a half hug on the way out with a laugh. Send me a picture with a drink in hand and your middle finger raised, yeah? I smiled. You'll get it. The airport was quiet. Peaceful. I arrived 3 hours early. Not because I had to, but because I could. I had no one else to wait for. No group check-in. No frantic mom organizing passports. No dad double-checking every bag. Just me, my boarding pass, and silence. Right before security, I checked my phone one last time. One new voicemail from Dad. I hesitated, then played it. His voice was calm, measured. Elias. Son, listen, I don't know what happened, but your mother's in a bit of a state right now. I'd appreciate it if you'd call me back. We need to figure out what to do. You still have the booking, right? Maybe we can. Click. I didn't listen to the rest. I turned my phone off. And when I stepped onto that plane, window seat, no interruptions, no guilt trips, I felt something I hadn't in years. Freedom. But what I didn't expect was what was waiting for me on the 3rd night in Santorini. The first 2 days were everything I needed. I arrived late, just as the sun was dipping behind the sea. The sky was a ridiculous orange-pink that looked like it had been photoshopped by someone who didn't understand restraint. My room was perched on a cliffside, white walls, stone floor, balcony overlooking the Aegean. The air smelled like salt and jasmine. It was quiet. Blissfully, achingly quiet. I checked in, unpacked half-heartedly, then sat on the balcony with a glass of wine I didn't even remember ordering, just watching the ocean blink under the stars. No phone, no guilt, no drama. The next morning, I walked through cobbled alleys and took pictures of blue-domed churches. A man in a linen shirt offered me grilled octopus from his family's cafe, and I ended up staying there 2 hours. He talked about his daughters. I said almost nothing. I was happy just to listen. I spent that afternoon sprawled across a sunbed, book in hand, feet in the pool, forgetting, truly forgetting, that back home, there were 5 people spinning in chaos, trying to undo the consequences of their choices. By the second night, I had a tan I didn't deserve and a calm I hadn't known in years. I journaled, something I hadn't done since college. Just scribbles, stream of consciousness stuff. I wrote about the silence, about how I'd spent my whole life being useful, not loved, not appreciated, just convenient. The wallet, the planner, the emotional sponge. I never realized how heavy it all was until I let it go. Then came night 3. I'd just gotten back from a long dinner by the water, stuffed with pasta, drowsy from wine. I took off my sandals at the door and flicked on the lights. My room looked the same, tidy, untouched, until I saw the envelope on the table. It was hotel stationery. No name, no handwriting, just an envelope, blank, placed neatly beside the fruit bowl. I froze. I hadn't told anyone where I was staying. Not Leo. Not coworkers. Definitely not my family. I'd booked this hotel late at night, after recanceling the first one. Paid anonymously through a virtual card. My name wasn't even tied to the front desk. Just the confirmation code and a check-in alias, E. Salas. I chose it on impulse. Salas. Latin for alone. Fitting. So how did this envelope get here? I picked it up carefully and opened it. Inside was a single folded sheet of paper, ripped at the edge like it had been torn from a notepad. 3 words, written in rushed, messy blue ink. Meet me downstairs. No signature. No time. Nothing else. I stared at it for a full minute, heart thudding like a metronome under my ribs. Was this a joke? A hotel mix-up? Room service trying to be dramatic? Or, no, I knew. I just didn't want to admit it yet. I left the note on the table and stepped out onto the balcony. From where I stood, I had a view of the courtyard below, dim lights, soft music playing from the lounge. A few guests sat around with cocktails, chatting softly. Everything looked normal. Until I saw the woman in the red shawl. She wasn't talking, just pacing. Pacing. Every few seconds, she'd check her phone. Look around. Take a few steps. Stop. Do it again. The movement was too familiar. The posture. The way she kept tugging at her sleeve like it was suffocating her. It was Mom. My stomach dropped. I didn't move. I didn't wave. I didn't even breathe. I just stood frozen behind the white stone railing, watching her search for me in a place she was never meant to be. And then my phone buzzed. Just once. A text. From a number I didn't recognize. Please. Just 5 minutes. I'm not here to fight. I should have turned around. I should have closed the door, pulled the curtain, and gone to bed. Let her wear holes into the floor with her pacing. But I didn't. Something about the stillness of the moment, the way the sea murmured behind me, the way the note shook slightly in my hand from the breeze. I needed to hear what she came to say. Not for her sake. For mine. I slipped on my sandals and walked out of the room. The hallway was quiet. The air felt heavier the closer I got to the elevator. When the doors opened on the ground floor, I saw her instantly. Still pacing. Still checking her phone. She turned and froze. We stared at each other for a second that felt longer than it should have. Her face was flushed. Eyes tired. Hair pulled back in a way that told me she didn't do it for photos. Not this time. Elias, she said, her voice cracking. I didn't respond. She took a tentative step forward. Can we sit? No, I said flatly. Her eyes welled, but she nodded. Okay, standing's fine. We stood like two strangers outside a hotel neither of us belonged in. She took a deep breath. I didn't know Jonah sent that voice note. I didn't mean for it to happen that way. I blinked slowly. But it did happen that way. I thought if we had the trip without tension, without fighting, we could reset. Reconnect. I laughed once, sharp and humorless. By excluding me? She winced. You've been so distant lately. You don't talk. You shut yourself in. I wonder why. Her voice faltered. It's not easy being a mother. And it's not easy being the kid who's always an afterthought. She opened her mouth, closed it again, like the words wouldn't come. Maybe they never existed. Then she said something I didn't expect. You're right. That stopped me. She reached into her bag, pulled out something folded, a document, maybe a letter. She held it out with both hands. This is for you. It explains everything. Or it tries to. I didn't take it. I just stared. Why are you really here? I asked. She hesitated. Because your father's furious. Because the girls are crying. Because Jonah's yelling at the airline staff. Because no one can figure out how to fix this. And she swallowed. Because you're the only one who ever could. That was the moment I realized something truly heartbreaking. She hadn't come to apologize. She'd come to recruit me. Again. Always. Just like every holiday, every emergency, every broken pipe, every forgotten password. I was the fixer. The dependable one. The human glue stick holding a cracked picture frame together. And I'd finally dropped it. I didn't say anything. I just turned and walked past her, toward the elevator. She didn't follow. But as the door slid shut, I saw her still standing there, envelope in hand, lips pressed together, staring like she was seeing me for the first time. And maybe, in a way, she was. I didn't open the envelope. Not that night. Not the next morning. Not even after I packed my bags on day 7 and boarded the flight back to Berlin. It stayed in my suitcase the whole time, wedged between a damp towel and the leftover sunscreen I never used. I kept thinking I'd get curious. That maybe I'd rip it open halfway through the flight, just to pass the time. Or that I'd cave once I was back home, slouched on the couch with nothing to distract me. But I didn't. Because deep down, I knew what was in it. Justifications. Maybe a few watery apologies, wrapped in excuses. A signature at the bottom. A fresh version of the story where everyone tried their best, where no one meant harm, and where, somehow, I was still supposed to come back. But I wasn't coming back. Not in the way they wanted. When I landed, Leo was waiting at baggage claim. He didn't ask questions, just handed me a warm pretzel and a water bottle and said, "I figured you'd need these more than a hug." He was right. We drove in silence for a while, until he finally broke it. "Did she show up?" I nodded. "Third night." "Did she yell?" "Nope." He glanced over. "That's worse." I didn't answer. I just watched the buildings blur past. Familiar streets. Familiar skyline. But everything felt different. Not because the city had changed, but because I had. Over the next few weeks, the storm I left behind followed me home. It started small, Mom called. Twice a day at first. Then once. Then not at all. I never picked up. The messages varied. Some were calm, pleading. Others, accusatory. "You humiliated us. You always overreact. You're not being fair to your sisters." Then came Jonah's messages, a little less diplomatic. His texts were blistering. Accusations layered over sarcasm. "Hope Santorini was worth burning your bridges. Guess we're not family anymore." The irony? None of them offered to pay me back. Not for the flights. Not for the hotel. Not for the mess they left behind. Apparently, my punishment for pulling the plug was also footing the bill. And I was fine with that. It cost me over 11,000 euros to finally buy my peace. Best money I've ever spent. Mia tried a different tactic. She showed up at my apartment one Saturday morning, standing in the hallway with a bouquet of peonies, my favorite. "I wanted to talk," she said softly. "Just talk." I didn't open the door. I stood behind it, arms crossed, listening. "Mia," I said, "what do you want to talk about?" She hesitated. "You hurt Mom." "Mom hurt me." "I know," she said, "but she's still Mom." I sighed. That's exactly the problem. There was a long pause. Then, a quiet, "We miss you." "No, you miss what I did for you." Another pause. She didn't deny it. "I have to go," I said. "Don't come here again." She left the flowers at the door. I gave them to the woman downstairs with the 2 cats and a smile too big for her age. She looked like someone who'd actually appreciate them. 2 days later, I got a group email. Subject line, "Family reunion?" From Dad. It was a rambling note about reconciliation and healing old wounds. An invitation to spend a weekend together in the countryside, just us, like things could be normal again. I clicked archive without reading the rest. I was done pretending that normal was good enough. Instead, I focused on building something new. I started cooking. Properly. Not just heat and eat. Real meals. Dishes I remembered from my grandmother's kitchen before things got complicated. Leo came over on Thursdays for pasta and movie nights. I even joined a local hiking group. Not because I liked hiking, I didn't, but because I liked being around people who didn't already have a version of me in their heads. I learned to be alone without feeling lonely. I slept better. I smiled more. Eventually, the calls stopped. The messages faded. My mother unfollowed me on social media, and for the first time, it didn't feel like a threat. It felt like a gift. Months passed. And then, one cloudy morning in October, I opened the envelope. I don't know why. Maybe curiosity finally won. Maybe I just needed closure. Or maybe I already had it and didn't realize. The letter was handwritten. 2 pages. It started with, "I know I'm not good at saying sorry." Which, if you think about it, is a pretty terrible way to start an apology. She wrote about how overwhelmed she was. How she wanted the trip to be perfect. How she thought excluding me would ease tension and let the others breathe. She claimed it wasn't personal, just strategic. Strategic. Like I was a landmine she had to plan around. There was a line that stuck with me, though. One that felt almost honest. "You've always made things look easy, Elias. So easy that we forgot you needed things too." It wasn't forgiveness, but it was truth. And maybe that was enough. I folded the letter, slid it back into the envelope, and tucked it away. Not to keep, but to remind myself that closure isn't always about hearing, "I'm sorry." Sometimes it's just understanding why it happened, so you can finally let it go. Today, I live differently. I don't answer calls from numbers I don't recognize. I don't loan money I'm not willing to never see again. I say no, even when it makes people uncomfortable. And I don't go where I'm not wanted. Because family, I've learned, isn't just the people who share your blood. It's the people who don't weaponize your silence. It's the ones who invite you, not because they need you to fix something, but because they want you there. Santorini was supposed to be the breaking point. But in a way, it became the beginning. An 11,300 euro lesson in knowing your worth. And I paid in full. I used to think silence was the best way to keep peace. Bite your tongue, let things slide, tell yourself, they didn't mean it that way. But there comes a point where silence stops being noble and starts becoming permission. My name's Chase. I'm 34. I'm the guy who fixes your leaking faucet, rewires your light switch, and patches your drywall for free, if you're family. And for years, I was that guy in my wife's family. The one who always showed up with his toolbox and a smile. Didn't matter if it was a Sunday morning or a holiday dinner. If something broke, they'd look straight past their phones and point at me like I was a living wrench. I met Haley when we were both 26. She was smart, beautiful, and quick with sarcasm. The kind of woman who could throw you off balance with a single raised eyebrow. We got married 2 years later. I was working as an independent contractor, mostly home repairs and renovations. Not flashy, but I was good at it. Real good. Haley worked in HR at a tech company, and while our worlds didn't overlap much, we made it work. At least at first. The thing about marrying someone is that you're not just marrying them, you're marrying their whole ecosystem. And Haley's ecosystem was invasive. Her parents, Rick and Marla, lived just 10 minutes away. Rick was the kind of man who prided himself on old-school values, which basically meant he liked to lecture everyone at the dinner table about how things were better when nobody complained and men worked with their hands. And guess what I did for a living? He loved to remind me. Marla was a bit more subtle. Her judgment came dressed up as compliments. "It's so nice that you're not one of those greedy contractors, Chase," she'd say while handing me a list of repairs for their rental property. "You're not in it for the money like those other guys." I'd nod, smile, and keep my mouth shut, even as I spent my only day off crawling under their bathroom sink. At first, I chalked it up to them being old-fashioned. You know, just stuck in their ways. When they asked for help, I showed up. Whether it was installing a new ceiling fan, repainting their sunroom, or patching holes in drywall, I was there. Free labor. No questions asked. They never offered money, not once. Sometimes they'd toss me a cold drink or a sandwich. Marla would laugh. "Don't worry, you'll get paid in lasagna." And I'd smile, trying not to look at the clock as my entire Saturday disappeared. Haley always seemed grateful at first. "You're amazing for doing this," she'd say. "They really appreciate it." But over time, her tone shifted. If I ever hesitated, if I said, "Can it wait until next week?" or "I already have 3 jobs booked," she'd get quiet. Not angry, just disappointed. Like I was letting her down by not jumping the second her parents needed something. "They're just asking for a few hours," she'd say. "You're so good at this stuff. Why wouldn't you help them?" That line, that guilt-wrapped compliment. I heard it so many times it echoed in my head when I closed my eyes. Then came the parade of other relatives. Haley's younger brother, Devin, who somehow managed to own a house but didn't know how to reset a circuit breaker, called me every time his heater made a weird noise. Her cousin, Amanda, accidentally booked a non-refundable weekend trip and needed someone to stay at her house and fix her kitchen cabinet hinges while she was away. Her aunt needed help setting up a patio. Her uncle had a mold problem in the basement. Every single time, it was always me. And somehow, my wife became the middleman, the coordinator. She'd text me with smiley faces like it was a favor we were doing. "Hey babe, Aunt Lucy's patio is really dangerous. Do you think you could swing by Sunday morning before your mom's lunch?" Or, "Devin tried to install a new light fixture and now the power's out in half the house. Think you could rescue him?" I wanted to say no. I really did. But each time, I'd look at her, and she'd just blink at me like of course I would help. I was the helpful guy, the fix-it husband, the dependable one. It wasn't just the time, it was how expected it became. They stopped even pretending it was a favor. One time, Rick called me during my anniversary dinner with Haley. We were mid-meal at this fancy steakhouse I had saved up for, and my phone buzzed. I ignored it. Then it rang again, and again. Finally, I excused myself and answered. Rick didn't even say hi. "The kitchen sink's leaking again. You got your tools in the truck?" I told him no, I didn't. I was out with Haley. He sighed, like I'd just told him I wrecked his car. "All right," he muttered. Guess I'll call an actual plumber. Just thought you might want to prove you're good for something. That stuck with me. Prove I'm good for something. I came back to the table, told Haley what he said. She laughed. That's just Dad, she said. He's just grumpy. Don't take it personally. But it was personal. It had always been personal. I just hadn't let myself feel it before. Then, one evening, we were at Rick and Marla's house for Haley's cousin's birthday. I had just finished replacing the bathroom light fixture. Yes, on a party day, because Rick had cornered me when we walked in and said, "Hey, before you grab a drink, that light's still out upstairs. Might as well knock it out now while everyone's mingling." I spent the first hour of the party sweating in their tiny bathroom with a headlamp and dusty wires. When I came back downstairs, nobody had even noticed I was gone. I stood there, looking at everyone laughing and drinking, and felt invisible. I went to the kitchen, grabbed a soda, and leaned against the counter to breathe. That's when I overheard it. Rick, in the living room, loud enough for half the guests to hear. "Chase? Oh, he's not family. He's just cheap labor with a wedding ring." Someone laughed. Then another. I froze. My ears rang. I didn't even hear who else was there, just that phrase on loop. Cheap labor with a wedding ring. I turned to look and saw Haley on the couch beside him. She wasn't laughing, not outright. But she wasn't frowning either. Just this little smirk on her face like she agreed but wouldn't say it out loud. Like it was an inside joke she was proud to be in on. Something cracked inside me right then. Not loud, not dramatic. Just a silent shift. Like when you realize a chair you've been sitting on for years has been broken the whole time. You just didn't notice because you were too used to the wobble. I didn't say a word. I didn't confront anyone. I finished my soda, walked back into the living room, and pretended I hadn't heard a thing. Haley looked at me, smiled like nothing was wrong, and leaned into my side. I smiled back. But inside, I was already gone. And the next weekend, I made sure they'd all know it. But not from me. From her best friend. Through a photo of me, lounging at a resort, next to her boss, smiling. And that was just the beginning. The weirdest part was how easy it was to act normal after that night. Like muscle memory took over. I kissed Haley on the forehead when we got home. Watched a movie with her on the couch. Told her I was tired, even though I barely blinked all night. I kept thinking about the smirk. That tiny, smug curve of her lips as her dad reduced me to a punchline. And she smirked. Not even a nervous laugh. Not a fake chuckle to defuse tension. A smirk. The kind of look you give when you think something is true. That image haunted me more than the insult itself. But I didn't bring it up. Not yet. I wanted to see what she'd do without prompting. Maybe she'd apologize. Maybe she'd admit it was messed up. Maybe she'd even defend me. But the next morning, she acted like nothing happened. Made coffee. Asked if I could look at Devin's garage door sometime this week because it's jammed again. I nodded. Said I'd see what I could do. I didn't say, "Your dad called me cheap labor in front of everyone last night," while you smiled like it was true. I just took a sip of my coffee and told her I'd need to check my schedule. And that's when it hit me. I wasn't a husband in this family. I was a tool. A resource. A convenient utility that could be summoned, borrowed, and put away without gratitude. Over the next week, I started paying more attention. Really paying attention. And once I opened that mental floodgate, I couldn't unsee it. Like how Marla always called me Handyman Chase when introducing me to new people. Never my son-in-law. Never Haley's husband. Always with a laugh, like it was some charming nickname, when really it was a label. A category. I wasn't a person to them. I was a walking wrench with a bank account they didn't have to worry about draining. Or how Haley never said thank you anymore. Not for the repairs. Not for the favors. Not even for the little things, like fixing her tire before work, or unclogging the shower drain she packed with half a bottle of conditioner. She used to. In the beginning, every little thing I did got a smile and a kiss. "You're the best, babe. What would I do without you?" Now, nothing. Just expectation. One night that week, I came home late from an emergency job, real client this time, not family, and found Haley on the phone with her mom. She didn't hear me walk in. I stood by the door, frozen in place, listening. He said he's swamped this weekend, but I'm sure he'll do it. He always does. I mean, what else is he gonna do? Watch football. Pause. No, he won't argue. He likes feeling useful. I quietly stepped back out before she saw me. Sat in the car for 15 minutes. Just sat there. It wasn't the words that stung. It was the certainty in her voice. The casual, Almost bored confidence that I would always say yes. That I needed to feel useful. Like I didn't have a spine. Like I was some broken man desperate for praise. It was a weird mix of heartbreak and clarity. Like watching someone you love cheat on you. Not with a person, but with the idea of you they've decided is more convenient. And they're in love with that idea. Not you. Not the real you. The real you is just in the way. That weekend, I told Haley I had taken a last-minute booking with a new client out of town. 2 hours away. I'd be gone Friday to Sunday. She didn't even ask who the client was. Just said, well, hopefully you're back in time to help Dad with the deck next week. He's already bought the materials. Bought the materials. Translation, booked your time without asking. I smiled. Said, I'll let you know. Then I packed a bag, grabbed the spare key to my cousin's place in Clearwater, and drove south. No tools. No work clothes. Just a change of pace. That's when I reached out to Jenna. Jenna was Haley's best friend. Technically her work bestie, but they'd gotten close fast. I always liked her. She was sharp, funny, a little too honest, but never cruel. Jenna was the only one in Haley's orbit who seemed to see me as more than the guy with the toolbox. And more importantly, she had recently transferred departments and now worked directly under Haley's boss, Tony. Tony and I had met once at a work party. He was older, silver hair, ex-military type, ran the department with discipline, but always had this friendly, calm demeanor. And when we spoke that night, he didn't ask about home repairs. He asked about me, my projects, my ideas. Even said something like, you've got the kind of mind that could build empires if someone gave you a bigger blueprint. I remembered that line, because no one in Haley's family had ever said anything even remotely close to that. So I reached out, told Jenna I was in Clearwater and had a weird idea I wanted to run by her. She said yes immediately. Said Tony was there for the weekend too, company resort thing. You should swing by for a drink, she texted. It'll be fun. It was more than fun. It was clarifying. We talked. We laughed. We played cards by the pool. Tony remembered everything we talked about at the party, even asked if I ever considered taking my skills to a broader market. Jenna joked about stealing me for her department's office renovations. We took a photo together, the three of us on lounge chairs, sunglasses on, drinks in hand. Just a simple photo. Nothing inappropriate. But it sent exactly the right message. I didn't post it. I didn't even send it. Jenna did. To Haley. With no caption. Just the image. Her husband, mysteriously unavailable for the weekend, smiling poolside next to her boss. I turned my phone off after that. The next few days were quiet. Peaceful. I stayed with my cousin another night, just for the silence. No phone calls. No errands. No guilt. When I finally turned my phone back on, I had 13 missed calls from Haley. 2 from Marla. 1 from Rick. And a dozen texts that started casual and turned frantic. Hey, Jenna just sent me something weird? Then where are you? Then are you with my boss? Followed by, you better explain right now. I didn't reply. Instead, I waited until Monday morning. Made breakfast. Sat at the table. Waited for Haley to come out of the bedroom. She looked wrecked. Red eyes, messy hair, her voice sharp and shaky. What was that? I sipped my coffee. What was what? She stared at me like I'd just slapped her. You disappeared. You lied about work. You went to a resort with my best friend and my boss. What are you trying to do? I tilted my head. I told you I was booked. I needed a break. Figured it was time I did something useful. Her jaw clenched. Don't be a smart. I cut her off. Calm. Steady. You've never once said thank you. She blinked. What? For the years. The work. The time. All the Saturdays I gave up. All the projects I did for free. Your dad calls me cheap labor. You smirk. Your mom parades me around like I'm the family handyman. You treat my skills like an extension of your dad's tool shed. And when I take a weekend to myself, suddenly I'm the villain. Her expression cracked for half a second, just a flicker, before she went cold. It was one comment. He was joking. No, I said, setting the mug down. He wasn't. And neither were you. She crossed her arms. So what? You're getting back at me by flirting with Jenna in front of my boss. That's your revenge. I looked her dead in the eyes. That wasn't revenge. And it wasn't. Not yet. But things were already in motion. Wheels turning. People watching. And what none of them knew, not Haley, not Rick, not Marla, was that I'd spent the last month quietly taking inventory. Of everything. The bank accounts. The property titles. The texts. The favors. The unpaid jobs. The so-called family business Rick tried to rope me into, the one he conveniently kept in his name while I did the work. I had let myself become a doormat, yes. But even doormats have their limits. And the moment I heard cheap labor with a wedding ring, mine hit. I was done being their tool. Now, I was going to show them what happens when the tool decides to build something for himself and tear down everything else along the way. But first, I had to keep playing my role a little longer. Just long enough to make them comfortable. Because the higher they stand, the harder they fall. And I was just getting started. I think part of me was still holding on to the idea that Haley might snap out of it. That maybe, just maybe, she'd realize how deep the cut was. That she'd come to me one night, voice trembling, eyes soft, and say, "I'm sorry. I didn't know I was doing this to you." That she'd want to fix it. But that moment never came. Instead, I got silence. Cold, distant silence. The kind that fills a room like fog and never lifts. She stopped texting me during the day. Stopped making dinner. We moved around each other like ghosts, only speaking when we had to. No arguments. No shouting. Just withdrawal. Like we were both tiptoeing on ice, waiting to see who'd fall through first. And then, 3 weeks after the resort weekend, she shattered the ice completely. It started with Rick. I got home late from a job. Real job. Again, not family. I walked into the kitchen, took off my boots, and saw Haley sitting at the table with her laptop open and that tight little smirk on her face. The same one I'd seen at her dad's house. She didn't look up when she said, "Dad's got a big project coming up. Wants to renovate the rental units." I paused. "Okay." She looked up then, eyes cold. "He wants you to head it." I blinked. "No." She raised an eyebrow. No. I'm not working for him anymore." She scoffed, like I was a child refusing to eat broccoli. "He's offering you 10% of the profits." I laughed once. The same profits he never shows anyone? The same profits he hides until tax season and then pretends there's nothing left to pay out? She didn't flinch. "It's still a good opportunity." "For who?" I asked. "For me to waste my nights and weekends again? For your family to squeeze more labor out of me while smiling to my face and mocking me behind my back?" Now she flinched. Just a little, but enough for me to notice. I leaned on the counter. "Tell Rick no. I'm done." She closed the laptop harder than necessary. "Fine. I'll tell him." But she didn't. The next day, Rick called me himself. "Heard you're playing hard to get," he said, like this was some romantic comedy and not my life. I told him the same thing. I'm out. No more favors. No more free labor. No more pretending I'm part of a family that only sees me as a hammer with a heartbeat. His response? "Well," he said with a nasty little chuckle, "if you're not in the family business, maybe it's time we reconsider your place in the family." Click. That wasn't a figure of speech. He literally hung up on me. I stood there with the phone still against my ear, hearing the dial tone like it was mocking me. For the first time, I let myself get angry. Really angry. Not annoyed. Not silently resentful. Livid. Not just at him, at her. Because she let it happen. Over and over. And now they were threatening to cut me out like I was a temp worker who asked for too many sick days. But I didn't call her. I didn't yell. I didn't storm home. Instead, I stopped by my friend Alex's place. Alex and I had known each other since high school. We'd worked construction jobs together for years before he moved into property investment. Smart guy. Quiet. Always watched more than he spoke. And he hated how Haley's family treated me. He'd bite his tongue every time I showed up to work late because I'd been at Rick's house fixing a fence or crawling under some rental unit to patch pipes. That night, I told him everything. The comment. The smirk. The call. He just sat there, sipping a beer, until he finally said, "You ever think about how much equity you've built for them?" "What do you mean?" He leaned forward. "You've added value to their properties, repaired their rentals, renovated kitchens, built decks, installed plumbing, electrical. That's tens of thousands in labor. And you didn't charge them a dime." I nodded. "Yeah. You got receipts?" That stopped me. Receipts. Photos. Texts. Before and after shots. Anything that proves you did the work. I thought about it. And slowly, I nodded again. "Yeah, I think I do." He smiled. "Start digging. Because I think it's time you made some of that equity work for you." That conversation rewired my brain. I stopped waiting for apologies. I stopped hoping Haley would change. I started documenting. Every job I'd done for them. Every house. Every hour I could account for. I went through my old phone backups, Dug out texts from 3 phones ago. Photos of Rick's cracked foundation before I fixed it. Screenshots of Marla's text thanking me for saving them another $6,000 after I replaced her HVAC system. Even a video of me in Devin's backyard, covered in mud, hauling out broken fence posts. I made a folder. I called it Contributions. Every night, I added more and more, until it was bigger than I thought possible. Then came the betrayal. The real one. It was a Saturday. I had just come home from a private client job, not family, actual paying work, when I noticed the garage was open. Haley's car was gone. I figured she was out running errands. I walked in, set down my gear, and something caught my eye. The filing cabinet. Our shared cabinet. It was unlocked. We kept our documents there, tax returns, property records, bank statements, and more importantly, my business files. I always kept paper backups for permits, quotes, and client invoices. I'm old school like that. I opened it and felt my stomach twist. Half the business folder was gone. Not shuffled. Not moved. Gone. I called her. No answer. Called again. Straight to voicemail. I sat down, trying to stay calm. Maybe she took them for something? Taxes? Insurance? Then I saw the envelope on the kitchen counter. No name. No note. Just sitting there like a landmine. I opened it. Inside were copies, not originals, of 3 invoices I'd written for Rick's properties. But they had Rick's name as the contractor. Not mine. I stood there, staring at them, feeling like the room had tilted sideways. Rick's name. Rick's company. Rick's logo. My work. My handwriting. Even, barely covered up with clumsy digital edits. I knew that logo. It was the same one on the family business paperwork he once waved in my face when trying to convince me to go all in. The same one I refused to sign under because I knew better than to co-sign a sinking ship. He had taken my work and passed it off as his own, retroactively, which meant someone had gone through my files, found those invoices, rewritten them, and printed them out to match his records. I didn't want to believe it. Not really. But the longer I stood there, the clearer it became. Haley had given them to him. She took my files. She gave them to Rick, and he used them to fabricate his value on my work. I sat down, stunned. This wasn't just disrespect anymore. This was theft, forgery, fraud, and betrayal from the one person who was supposed to have my back. When Haley finally came home, I didn't say anything. Not at first. I watched her walk through the door like nothing had happened. She dropped her purse, kicked off her shoes, stretched. Then she froze. She saw the open cabinet, the missing envelope, and she knew. Her face went pale, then red, then blank. "You went through my things," she said. I laughed. I couldn't help it. It was this weird, broken laugh that sounded more like a cough. "Your things? That's my business folder. My invoices." She didn't say anything. "Did you give them to Rick?" Still nothing. "Did you give my work to your father so he could forge records and claim I was just a hired hand?" That one landed. She winced. She started. No just. Tell me the truth." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "He needed them for the loan application." I stared at her. "What loan?" "For the renovations. He said the bank needed proof of past projects. So he took mine and put his name on them." She looked down. "It's still the same work. The same family." I felt something break then. Not loudly. Quietly. Like when you step on something soft and realize too late it was living. I walked out, got in my truck, and drove. That night, I didn't sleep. I didn't eat. I just sat in the cab of my truck outside Alex's place, watching the streetlights flicker. When he opened the door at 6 a.m. and saw me sitting there, he didn't ask a thing. He just handed me coffee and said, "So, what's the move?" I looked up at him, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel helpless. I felt focused. She took everything I gave her. I said, my time, my work, my trust. And now she wants to rewrite the story, so I was never part of it. Alex nodded slowly. Then we rewrite it back. And what I did next? Let's just say it made every fake invoice, every unpaid favor, every smug smirk look like child's play. But I'll get to that. Soon. First, I had to play my part a little longer. Because this time, I wasn't building their dream. I was building the blueprint for their collapse. I hit my lowest point a week after I found the invoices. Not because of the paperwork itself. Paper can be replaced, photocopied, scanned, but because of the way everything else started to crumble around it, like dominoes that had been standing patiently, waiting for a nudge. It began with the smallest things. Clients who had once trusted me without thinking suddenly asking for references I didn't have, or canceling because some neighbor told them, "Rick handles all of that now." Word moves fast in a small town when someone with a louder voice decides to speak. I lost 2 steady contracts in the same month. One client said they felt uncomfortable hiring me after hearing I was involved in a family dispute. That one hurt more than the financial hit. It felt like my name had been rebranded to mean unreliable overnight, and I had no control over the sales pitch. Haley grew colder in a way that wasn't dramatic, but was surgical, meticulous removal of warmth. She stopped setting aside my coffee cup, stopped leaving notes on the fridge, stopped calling in the little ways she used to. Nights were the hardest. We slept in the same bed, but with the distance of 2 strangers who had once learned each other's breathing patterns. I remember waking up one night and listening to the space where her side of the bed should have creaked, and it was like standing at the edge of a cliff, the wind in my ears telling me how far I'd fallen. There was grief, sure, a slow, aching hollow, but under it there was also a quiet fury that felt steadier than grief, like gravity had shifted and I could see the ground clearly for the first time. Money got tight. I'd been careful, but being hit with unexpected vet bills for the dog we had taken in, replacing equipment, and losing 2 major clients chewed into my savings faster than I predicted. There were nights when I stared at the bank app and tried to will math into making sense. I canceled a weekend with Alex that would have been good for my head because the truck needed repairs and the mechanic wanted cash up front. I started saying no to small favors I used to do for people I liked, pumping a neighbor's gas, dropping by to help with a stuck window, and each time I said no, I felt both a sting and a relief, like pruning a vine that had been strangling me. One afternoon, I went to Rick's rental property under the pretense of checking the foundation. I know him too well to think he wouldn't be suspicious, but I needed to see how he'd been representing the work. What I found made my chest tighten. The freshly painted kitchen he'd shown off at a community contractor's meetup bore my work. The sink installed to my exact specs. The tile pattern I'd chosen last summer. Even the calluses on the trim where I'd sanded too close and left a faint white mark. A framed photo in the living room had him and Marla smiling, and when I asked about it, he waved me off. "You did a fine job, Chase. Glad you could help." He said it like a compliment. It was a lie, but everyone clapped. I left and my hands were shaking. The personal stuff hurt more than the reputation damage. My mom called and asked if everything was okay. I downplayed it. Friends suggested I move in with them for a while, that a break might help. I refused. The idea of leaving felt like admitting defeat. But I was tired in a way I'd never been tired before, not just physically, but morally. Like every day, I had to dress myself in restraint and patience and swallow more indignity. I missed the part of myself that used to tinker in the garage for fun, who would tinker until midnight because the solution was its own reward. Now it felt like every tool I owned was a ledger entry in someone else's account. The worst hit came one rainy Tuesday. I had been working late on a small deck for a new client and finished later than planned. When I drove up the lane to our house, Haley's car was gone. Inside, on the kitchen table, was a thick brown envelope with my name written across the front in Haley's handwriting. My heart stopped before I opened it. Inside was a packet labeled separation agreement. More than a form, a whole packet of paperwork prepared like someone had planned the steps out without telling me. It included a draft of a post she'd apparently written in case things didn't work out, outlining how she'd been used by me and how the family had tried to be supportive. It was clinical. It was cold. It read like someone had rehearsed being hurt and decided to make it official before speaking to me. Up until that moment, I had imagined many endings. I had plotted versions where I left first, dramatic exits with boxes, and a door slam. I had imagined calm conversations where we both saintly apologize and get back to normal. I had imagined slow fade-outs where we become roommates rather than partners. But seeing that packet, a preemptive betrayal, felt like a stone thrown through a window I didn't know I had. It was a challenge, and for the first time I recognized how far they were willing to go to rewrite reality. They wanted to make the story about me being the problem. Not Haley's silence, not Rick's theft, but me. The man who'd spent years walking to their houses with a toolbox and a smile was suddenly a threat that needed neutralizing. I did the weirdest thing then. I sat down and wrote a letter. Not for Haley, not for Rick, but for myself. It was small, Only a page, but I wrote it like I was notarizing a covenant with the universe. I will not beg. I will not be gaslit into apologizing for being me. I will protect my work. I will not be erased. I sealed it into an envelope and put it in the glove box of my truck like a talisman. It felt silly and real at the same time. Maybe it was a ritual, a step I needed to take to declare the end of something or the beginning of another. I started cleaning up evidence, not deleting, but organizing. I copied photos to new drives, backed up texts, made spreadsheets of hours spent on each project for Rick's rentals, hours that, when valued properly, would make his 10% payout look like small change, and reached out to a contact at the local trade association to pull permitting records that listed me as the contractor on jobs Rick now claimed. I found myself walking into the town clerk's office with documents and coffee, asking for copies, answering questions, and feeling very much like a man reclaiming his past. Nobody at the clerk's office took sides. They were just filing machines. But their indifference felt useful. It meant facts existed outside of the family's stories. Meanwhile, Haley's behavior turned stranger. She began to stage things almost theatrically, leaving her phone face up with a paused podcast that had nothing to do with us, folding laundry carefully, and placing a shirt with my initials in a visible spot as if testing whether I would notice. Once she invited her mother over and staged a coincidental discussion about how sometimes marriages just fade away when both parties want different things. I let them talk. I answered politely when asked about us. I didn't throw accusations. I used to think confrontation was revelation. Now I'd learned silence could be strategy. I played my part with careful precision, showing up to family dinners with a neutral smile, letting them believe I was crumbling if that helped them feel victorious. There were nights I wanted to teach Haley a lesson, to show her the cost of her choices. But as the rage simmered, something else took hold: clarity. The more I cataloged and planned, the more I realized that an emotional outburst would ruin more than it would fix. If I wanted to rebuild anything, whether that was a life without them or one where they had to answer for what they'd done, it had to be done cleanly, with proof and timing. I started rehearsing conversations in the mirror, not to bait them, but to prepare for the legal and social truth I would eventually reveal. I called a lawyer's office for a consultation but didn't hire anyone yet. The idea felt premature. Instead, I practiced patience. It was the hardest part. I'd always been a fixer who loved the instant gratification of a repaired leak or a square tile set perfectly. This required me to be the kind of craftsman who measured twice and cut once. In life, one evening, as late autumn smell crept into the air and the leaves skittered like old bills across the driveway, I sat at the kitchen table with three things: my laptop open to a folder labeled contributions, a printed list of clients I'd helped over the past 5 years, and a small recorder I'd bought on impulse. I hit record and spoke into it like I was crafting an affidavit, telling the story of each job, the dates, the hours, the chats with Rick who had been there when I started, and the way he'd insisted on helping after I finished. I documented conversations from memory, voiced doubts, and then cataloged facts. It felt almost absurd, talking to myself in a house that once felt safe, but also necessary. If they wanted to rewrite history, I would produce a new narrative backed by documents, witnesses, and proof. Just as I finished and turned the recorder off, the front door opened and Haley stepped in, quieter than usual. She looked exhausted in a way I hadn't seen before. Maybe the weight of whatever script she was following had started to feel heavy even to her. She sat across from me without looking at the folder, then finally said, "You can't do this. You can't make this a thing." "What thing?" I asked. "The whole us versus them thing. The paperwork, the digging. It's tearing everyone apart." "It's tearing me apart," I said. "I didn't ask for this." "No," she said, her voice soft. "But you started it by disappearing. By going off with Jenna and Tony. People are talking." Her eyes flicked toward the window, as if listening for those gossiping tongues. "I'm losing my friends." "You gave them my invoices," I said. "You handed over my work." She flinched, but then wiped her face with the back of her hand like she was clearing fog. "Your invoices helped Dad get the loan," she said quietly. "He needed them to show the bank he'd done work before. I thought. You thought you'd help him and probably get me a steady paycheck in his new venture," I finished for her. "That's not what happened." She looked at me as if measuring the man in front of her for real, the way you examine a car for dents after a hit and run. Chase, she said, we can fix this. No, I said, and it surprised me how final it sounded. Not like this. She looked down, and for a moment I saw vulnerability, not the kind I'd been allowed to see when things were easy, but a deeper, rawer fear. I'm scared, she admitted. I don't want to lose my family. Then stop helping them steal mine, I said. If you want to keep both, you have to be honest. That's the only way. She stood abruptly, pacing like someone rehearsing a script, and then she did something that crossed a line I hadn't expected. She slid an envelope toward me. It was the same brown envelope from a few weeks ago, the one with the prepared separation packet. Sign here, she said, her voice flat. It'll be cleaner for everyone. I stared at it. For a second, the old part of me, the one who wanted to keep peace at any cost, wanted to take it, sign, and hand over the key to whatever remained of our marriage in exchange for an end to the noise. But something else had changed. The months of being overlooked, the theft, the staged pity, the careful erasure, they had shifted my center. I realized that signing would give them everything. My work, my reputation, my narrative. It would let them make me small on paper and keep all the benefits of my labor without responsibility. I slid the envelope back. I can't, I said. Not like that. She made a sound that could have been anger or sorrow. Sometimes the two are the same. Then what do you want, Chase? What do you want me to do? I looked at her for a long time, measuring the person I had once married and the person who sat across from me now. The house hummed softly with the sound of the refrigerator and the distant rush of rain. Outside, the evening had settled into a hush that made every small movement feel important. I could fix this with a conversation, or with compromise, or with patience. Or I could do something else entirely, something that would force the truth into daylight. I had evidence, witnesses, and a growing sense of purpose. But evidence alone wouldn't hurt them enough. Timing and exposure would. I knew that if I moved too soon, I'd lose the leverage I'd been painstakingly gathering. If I moved too late, I'd risk losing everything I'd managed to keep intact. Haley watched me and said, almost like a dare, if you don't sign, what then? Are you going to take Dad to court? Are you going to ruin both our families? I set my jaw. I'm going to tell the truth, I said, and I'm going to make sure the truth has receipts. She swallowed. Do you even know what you're asking? The fallout. I do, I replied, and I'm ready for it. She stood there, breathing fast, and for the first time I saw panic where there had been only calculation. The choice I had to make next was more than a legal tactic or a petty revenge. It would redefine us. It would expose more than just invoices. It would force everyone to choose between loyalty to the comfortable lie and accountability to reality. I slid the recorder back into my pocket, the small device now a quiet dagger of proof. I picked up my keys. And then, before I walked out the door, before the first move in the part one had been planning for months, I did one last thing. I opened the glove box, found the envelope I had written to myself, and tucked it into the folder labeled Contributions, right on top. It felt ceremonial. It felt like an oath. I paused at the doorway, hand on the knob, and for the first time in months, I felt the dark and terrifying peace of someone standing on the edge of an action that could not be undone. Outside, the rain had stopped and a thin moon cut through the clouds, sharp and indifferent. I turned the knob, and then my phone buzzed. It was an unknown number with a short message. We know what you've been doing. Stop now or things get worse. I closed the door slowly, listening to my own breath, and realized that however I moved next, the game had already been noticed. When you spend long enough being underestimated, it does something to you. It compresses your ambition into something sharp, dense, like a diamond forming under pressure. After months of being treated like a background character in my own life, I had something most people never get, clarity. Not just about who I was dealing with, but about who I was without them. After that text, we know what you've been doing. Stop now or things get worse. I didn't panic. I stared at it for a solid minute, then chuckled under my breath. It wasn't a threat, not really. It was fear. Someone, somewhere, was nervous. And fear meant I was finally becoming visible again. Fear meant someone had noticed I'd stopped playing my part. It was time to accelerate. The first thing I did was move. Not out of the house yet. I knew better than to make an obvious retreat. But I started sleeping in the guest room. When Haley asked why, I told her I snored and didn't want to keep her up. She nodded like it made sense, but we both knew what it meant. The glue was cracking. But I wasn't going to just walk away and let her stage a pity narrative. No, if this was war, I was going to draw the battlefield. I went back to work, not just on jobs, but on myself. I rebranded my business. New name, new logo, new website. I let go of the dusty Chase Fixes It branding Haley's family used to mock and launched a sleek new identity, Hollow Ridge Restoration. Clean, professional, focused on full renovations, not patch jobs. I hired a freelance designer off Reddit who sent back branding that looked like something from HGTV, bold lines, deep green tones, high-end aesthetics. I even got matching business cards and embroidered polos. Then I went further. I built out a portfolio using the photos I'd collected, before and afters of Rick's rentals, Marla's sunroom, even Devin's ridiculous backyard deck I'd rebuilt after he butchered it with a rented saw. But this time, I added clear captions. Kitchen remodel. Labor provided by Chase Hollow, unpaid. Materials reimbursed. Work falsely attributed to RM Properties in later filings. I didn't post these publicly yet. I compiled a digital booklet, 26 pages of side-by-side comparisons, emails, texts, invoices, permits, and I sent it to one person, Tony, Haley's boss. He called me that afternoon. "Chase," he said, "this is impressive. And honestly, disturbing." I told him I wasn't suing yet. I wasn't blackmailing anyone. I was just showing the truth. Quietly, calmly, respectfully. I made it clear I wasn't trying to blow up Haley's job. I only wanted her boss to know who had been leveraging his name behind the scenes. He thanked me, and then he asked something I didn't expect. "You ever think about expanding your work? Commercial spaces? Office redesigns?" My heart skipped. That was my dream. Always had been. But Haley's family had convinced me to stay small. Local. Safe. The idea of chasing bigger contracts had always been dismissed as too risky by Rick, or a waste of energy by Marla. Why bother when you've got all the business you need right here? Except I hadn't had business. I'd had chains. Now I had options. Tony introduced me to a contact in his network, an interior architecture firm that needed a reliable contractor for small business builds. Their first job? A bakery renovation downtown. Not huge, but public-facing. High traffic. The kind of project people talked about. I took the job. I hired 2 guys I trusted, friends from my early construction days who'd always been loyal, and we got to work. The bakery project ran for 3 weeks, and by the end of it, I had 3 more requests waiting. A local gym, a coffee shop, a co-working space. Every single one had heard about me through Tony's network. And just like that, my name stopped being a whisper. It became a conversation. Back at home, the tension with Haley simmered in the walls. She knew something had shifted. I came home later. I was cleaner, sharper, more focused. I didn't argue, didn't volunteer information, didn't ask about her parents or their projects. She asked once, "Where have you been all day?" I said, "Work." She said, "You look different." I said, "I feel different." She stared for a second too long, then walked away. The distance between us grew in ways she couldn't control. She used to pull strings through guilt, obligation, family. But now those strings hung limp. And when she tried to yank them, they didn't move anything. I wasn't anchored anymore. I also reached out to a lawyer, a real one this time. Her name was Nadine, and she had this quiet, surgical demeanor that made every room feel like a courtroom. I handed her the envelope with my evidence and told her I wanted to explore every legal option without making a public move, yet. She called me back 3 days later with a list. Unpaid labor on private properties. Misrepresentation in bank loan documents, with forged invoices. Trademark usage of my name in Rick's company promotional materials. Potential slander through Haley's drafted separation post. "This isn't just personal," Nadine said. "This is strategic defamation. They're trying to erase your professional identity and absorb your labor footprint." That's when I realized something deeper. They weren't just trying to cut me out of the family. They were trying to replace me. Not just personally, but professionally. Reassign credit. Reallocate blame. Rewrite the story so I'd never existed in the first place. I felt my chest tighten, not in fear, but in focus. That's when I filed the paperwork to incorporate Hollow Ridge Restoration as an LLC and started the process to copyright my original logo and tagline from back when I was just Chase Fixes It. Because if they wanted a war of names, I was bringing receipts. Then something strange happened. Jenna reached out. She asked to meet at a cafe, said she had something to share. I trusted her. She was the only one who'd ever looked me in the eye and talked to me like I was a person, not a tool. We sat down, and she slid her phone across the table. "They've been planning a narrative," she said. "I thought you should see this." It was a group chat. Screenshots. Marla. Haley. Rick. Chat title, Family Matters. The messages were damning. "If he makes noise, we frame it as a bitter ex thing. No one will care what a contractor says once the story's public. He doesn't have the reach. He doesn't have the charisma. We release Haley's side first. Chase won't go nuclear. Just make sure he signs before the holidays. People are too distracted to care then." My stomach dropped. It wasn't just strategy. It was manipulation. They weren't preparing for the fallout. They were designing it. I looked at Jenna. "Why are you showing me this?" She leaned forward. "Because I've seen how they treat people. And you deserve to know what's coming." I nodded slowly. "Thank you." She hesitated, then added, "And because I think you're going to win." That stuck with me. That night, I went home and cleaned out the guest room. Not just to make space, to record. I turned it into a mini studio. Ring light. Camera. Whiteboard. Clean backdrop. I wasn't going to play the victim. I was going to tell my story. Before they could tell theirs. I wrote a script. Calm. Professional. No insults. Just a clear, fact-driven breakdown of what had happened. Unpaid labor, false documents, family pressure, a years-long cycle of manipulation. I blurred names, kept it anonymous, but specific enough that anyone who knew us would recognize the timeline. I didn't post it yet, but I saved it. It was my bulletproof vest. The final piece? I bought out a small ad slot in the local Builders Association newsletter, a monthly dispatch that went to every contractor, permit officer, architect, and tradesperson in the county. It said, "New name, same hands, same ethics. Hollow Ridge Restoration, built on skill, not shortcuts." At the bottom was my email and my new business number. Within a week, I had 9 new project inquiries. Haley noticed. She saw the emails, the printed shirts, the card left on our front porch by a client with a handwritten, "Thank you for saving our business." She didn't ask questions, but one morning, she stood in the kitchen and said, "They're going to be angry." I sipped my coffee. "Let them be." She hesitated. "You don't want peace?" I looked at her. "Peace isn't built on silence, Haley. It's built on respect." She didn't reply. And in that silence, I realized something final. I wasn't hers anymore. Not her fixer. Not her family's errand boy. Not a man waiting for scraps of validation. I was a builder. A business owner. A man with proof. And I was almost ready. Not for revenge. For release. But first, I had one more move to make. One last reveal that would flip the script completely. And when I pulled that trigger, their story, the one they'd been polishing for months, would shatter like cheap glass. I kept the move small and surgical. No yelling, no vindictive midnight posts, no cheap theatrics. That's the point of a proper reveal. If you want it to sting, make it inevitable. Make the facts stand up on their own. First, I handed Nadine every scrap I had and asked her to do the one thing I couldn't do without looking petty. Package it so the people who mattered would take it seriously. She turned my messy folder into a tenet of legal logic. The contributions folder became an exhibit list. The texts, photos, and paired permits became a timeline. The forged invoices were highlighted, dated, and matched against bank records Nadine subpoenaed through the right channels. She added a list of witnesses, clients who'd hired me for paid work, a drywall supplier who had receipts with my handwriting, the town clerk who confirmed permits issued in my name. I watched her turn my anger into something that could stand in court or at the front page of a paper. Next, we went after the banks. Nadine drafted a complaint about loan fraud and misrepresentation and sent it to the bank that had funded Rick's renovations. I included the photos, the contracts with my name blacked out and then revealed, and a clean cover letter explaining how loans were supported by fabricated contractor histories. They opened an investigation within days. That was step 1, take away the financial foundation. Step 2 was reputation. I scheduled a quiet meeting with the county contractor licensing board and handed them copies of the permits filed under my name and the sudden ownership change in Rick's records. The inspector who took my files looked at me like a man who'd watched a magician pull too many rabbits from the same hat. "We get a lot of calls," he said, "but this is solid." He promised to audit the permits for 2 of Rick's recent projects. That mattered because permits, unlike gossip, Get logged and relogged. Evidence with timestamps has teeth. Step 3 was preemptive truth. We didn't wait to be pushed into the corner, so I took the corner myself. I recorded the video I'd rehearsed. Calm, measured, no melodrama. I told the story not as betrayal, but as fact. Who I was, what I'd done for the properties, the invoices that had later been attributed to someone else, and the proof that matched. I didn't call anyone names. I didn't try to tear anyone down. I simply asked 3 things: acknowledge the record, return the credit, compensate the unpaid labor if necessary. I signed my name at the end of the recording, looked at the camera for one long second, and stopped. I handed the footage to Nadine and asked her to hold it in escrow. With those pieces in place, I let the dominoes fall in a controlled way. Nadine filed the complaint and sent a redacted version of the evidence to a local investigative reporter I'd met months earlier through Tony. The reporter called. He didn't ask to sensationalize. He asked for accuracy. He wanted dates, copies of permits, the documents proving the invoices had been rebranded. He agreed to hold the story until the bank's preliminary findings came back, but he made clear that if the bank confirmed even a whisper of impropriety, the story would run fast and clean. Meanwhile, I quietly contacted a few clients who'd been told Rick had done their work. I showed them before and after photos, receipts from suppliers with my name, and asked if they'd be willing to confirm, on record, that I'd done the job. A coffee shop owner who'd lost my business card in a move smiled and said, "I'll say it to anyone who asks. You saved my opening." Little by little, the quiet chatter shifted. People I'd helped for free suddenly had the language to call it what it was: unpaid labor, misattributed work, and a pattern. The bank called 2 weeks later. Their tone was careful, like a man stepping around a beehive. "There are inconsistencies," the loan officer admitted. "We're pausing disbursements on the renovation loan pending further verification." I felt something like vindication, but I wouldn't let myself gloat. This was just leverage. The bigger play was public accountability. That night, with the bank paused and the licensing board asking for a meeting, Nadine gave me the green light. "You don't have to do the video," she said. "But if you want people to hear you before they hear their version, this is the moment." I uploaded it, not to social feeds first, to a secure link hosted via the firm. Then, with the reporter and Nadine on a timed release, we turned the key. The story that ran the next morning was not a scream. It was paper, dates, documents, and the kind of calm reporting that made you feel like you'd missed something obvious for years. Local contractor alleges family business fraud, the headline read. The leader paragraph laid out the claim: long-term unpaid labor, forged invoices, and contested loan documents. They included my video link. The initial reaction in the small town was messy. Some people called my actions harsh. Others called them overdue. Rick's sister posted a defensive message on Facebook about family dynamics, and a neighbor left a voicemail telling me to stay out of family matters. Haley texted once, "Why are you doing this?" I didn't answer her. I had nothing left to prove to someone who handed me over like a receipt. What mattered were the ripples. The bakery owner posted a short note. "Thank you, Chase. You saved our lease." The contractor board announced an audit. The bank froze the loan entirely. A local supplier confirmed over email that checks had been made out to me for materials that Rick's company later claimed as theirs. The county inspector scheduled site visits. The reporter set up follow-ups exploring whether other families had had similar issues with misattributed work. Jenna texted, "You did good." Tony called and said, simply, "You did what you had to." And then something unexpected happened. I got a call from a mid-sized construction firm in the neighboring county. They said they had seen the article and were interested in hiring Hollow Ridge Restoration for a commercial build-out slated for the spring. A call like that changes the math. It meant payroll, subcontractors, a team that could finally be paid what they were owed, and it meant monthly deposits, not handshake promises. I sat at my kitchen table that night, the same table where Haley had pushed an envelope at me only months before, and I felt, for the first time in a long time, steady. The humiliation had been a furnace. The work had been the hammer. Now, the sparks were flying in the direction I wanted. But the moment of satisfaction was short-lived. At 11:03 p.m., as I was closing up the laptop to go to bed, my phone buzzed with a single unknown number. Nadine's name flashed next. She was calling from the courthouse steps. "Chase," she said without greeting, breathless. "You need to get over here." "Why? What happened?" I asked. "Bank just notified us." They've frozen more than the loan. There's an internal audit on several accounts. The licensing board found irregular filings for 3 properties. Also, the reporter says Rick's been quietly contacting former clients to discredit you. But that's not, she paused, then added. There's a warrant request in the works. Someone says your backup drive has irregular files tied to their corporate accounts. My chest dropped and then tightened. Irregular files? Like what? Could be anything. Could be nothing, she said. But they're moving fast and they want your statement. If I were you, I'd come down now. I drove through a sleepy, silvered town and thought about everything that had happened up to that moment. The smirk on Haley's face, the forged invoices, the long nights backing up evidence. I thought about the recorder in my glove box, the envelope I'd written to myself, the quiet video that had shifted public opinion. I felt the weight of the moment smaller and sharper, like a coin in the palm of your hand. When I pulled into the courthouse parking lot, lights were already flashing in the distance. People I'd waved to at community games and festivals stood in small groups, talking in hushed tones. I caught a glimpse of Rick across the street, jaw tight, flanked by a man in a suit who looked like he had read too many legal thrillers. Nadine met me at the courthouse steps, her coat flapping, eyes hard. They're angry, she said. But anger isn't guilt. It's not proof. We have time to control the narrative, but don't underestimate what they'll try. People with more to lose get louder. I nodded. What do you need me to do? She reached into her briefcase and handed me a small sealed envelope. This is a request for your statement, but also a notice that someone's petitioned for a temporary seizure of your business assets pending an investigation. They're framing you as the disruptor. Be careful who you trust. The metal in my hand felt heavy. I thought then of the recorder in my glove box, of the envelope I'd written to myself, of the layered backups I'd made and stashed in places Haley would never think to look. I had built a chain of custody without knowing I was building one. Copies with timestamps, witnesses lined up, and an attorney who could move faster than their cousins. I was ready to fight. But even as I walked into that courthouse, my phone buzzed again. A photo from an unknown sender. It was blurred, but my stomach saw it before my brain did. Haley at a dinner table, laughing, and beside her sat someone I hadn't expected to see at all. Rick, smiling, and on his phone, a document open with my handwriting visible. I swallowed and looked at Nadine. We go now, I said. She nodded. We walked into the hallway where the fluorescent lights hummed and the air smelled like old paper and coffee. The next steps would decide everything. I took a breath, felt the evidence in my pocket like a small, heavy stone, and stepped forward. The courthouse hall was quiet, but it pulsed with tension. I could hear the low hum of distant conversations, heels clacking against linoleum, the occasional squeak of a chair. It smelled sterile, paper, ink, coffee. It was the kind of place where truth either got buried under a pile of folders or dragged into the light. Nadine led the way, heels deliberate, her face carved from marble. I followed close, the envelope in my pocket weighing more than it should. We stopped just outside the meeting room. Through the frosted glass, I could make out silhouettes. One of them Rick's, arms crossed, leaning back like he was still holding court in his backyard. Haley was there too. She sat beside him, her posture stiff, face unreadable. She didn't look toward the door. I wondered if she knew I was just a few feet away. I wondered if she cared. Chase, Nadine said quietly. This is the moment where you either let them steamroll the narrative or you reclaim it. You don't need to go in angry. You just need to go in clear and calm. I nodded. I didn't feel nervous. I felt ready. They didn't expect me to bring records. They didn't expect me to bring a lawyer who knew how to build a case backwards. And they definitely didn't expect me to bring control. I walked into that room and watched Rick's expression twitch, just a second of unease before he masked it with his usual smug bravado. Well, look who decided to show, he said, chuckling, as if the last few months had been a misunderstanding. I didn't answer him. Instead, I placed a thick folder of hard copies on the table. Labeled, dated, indexed, invoices, photos, emails, material receipts, permits, all with my name, not his. The court clerk blinked. The bank's rep leaned forward. Haley swallowed and looked down. For the next hour, Nadine walked them through every detail, like a surgeon explaining a precise incision. She didn't raise her voice once. She didn't need to. By the end of the meeting, no one was smiling. The court placed a hold on Rick's accounts pending further investigation. The licensing board announced a formal audit of RM Properties. The bank, once neutral, filed an official fraud alert internally. And then, the final nail. Nadine slid a separate document across the table toward Haley. A petition for a no-fault divorce, along with a financial claim for repayment of unpaid labor contributions over 6 years, citing misrepresentation, forgery, and reputational damage. All backed by notarized statements, a digital timestamp trail, and a list of potential witnesses. Haley looked up at me for the first time in weeks. She didn't cry. She didn't rage. She just nodded, slowly, like someone watching the structure collapse around them in real time. She signed. When I walked out of that courthouse, the sky was soft and overcast. The wind was cool, not cold. I could hear traffic in the distance, but it felt far away, like a sound from another life. Nadine turned to me and said, "It's done. At least the legal part." "No," I said, breathing deep. "Now it starts." Because revenge, I realized, isn't about destruction. It's about restoration. Reclaiming your name, your time, your story. And I had done all three. A year later, Hollow Ridge Restoration was booming. I had 5 full-time employees, a backlog of clients, and my own space. A modest office with windows that looked out on a town that finally knew who I was. Tony's company became a regular client. Jenna visited often, not just for business, but because friendship built on respect always survives the fire. And Haley? Last I heard, she moved in with her mother. Rick's properties were under new management. The bank called in the loan. The family business quietly dissolved. She never reached out again. I didn't need her to, because I hadn't just walked away. I built my exit, brick by brick. And when they tried to burn the bridge behind me, I paved a road instead. One that led me forward. One where I never, ever, picked up a wrench for anyone who didn't deserve it. Not again. Not ever. Thanksgiving used to be my favorite holiday. The smell of roasted turkey, the chatter of relatives crammed into my parents' house, the football game playing faintly in the background. It always felt like home. But this year was different. My name's Brian. I'm 31, and this was the first time in 3 years that I agreed to join my family for the big dinner. You'd think a reunion after so long would be warm, but my family has a way of turning everything into a competition. The moment I walked in, I felt it. That subtle hush when someone unexpected enters. My mom hugged me, but it was one of those quick, polite hugs, not the kind you give your son you haven't seen in months. My dad gave me a stiff pat on the back and asked, "Still busy with whatever it is you do?" As if I spend my days knitting socks in a basement. I run my own small business. Not flashy, but it's mine, and it's doing well enough that I've built a quiet life away from the family chaos. Then there's my older brother, Jason. Golden child, family favorite, whatever you want to call him. He's the type who still brags about his high school football trophies at 34 and manages to turn every conversation into a subtle flex. He's married to Amanda, who has the sharpest passive-aggressive smile you'll ever see, and they've been trying for a baby for years. According to my mom, this struggle somehow elevates them into sainthood status, and every family event revolves around them. When I sat down at the table, Jason's first words to me were, "Still single and wasting your life?" He said it loud enough for the whole table to hear, like he was tossing a grenade and waiting for the explosion. The table chuckled. My uncle even laughed out loud and muttered something about, finally someone saying it. My face burned, but I swallowed it. I've learned that clapping back too early just turns me into the bad guy. So I played along, shrugged, and said something like that. But I could feel the knot forming in my stomach. It's wild how quickly you can be turned into a caricature of yourself around family. To them, I was still single Brian, the guy who couldn't settle down, who never gave his parents grandkids. They didn't know the truth, and I hadn't told them, not because I was hiding anything, but because I learned the hard way that my family likes to take good news and turn it into gossip fuel. As the dinner went on, I noticed little digs thrown my way. Mom asked if I'd finally figured out how to cook a proper meal since I lived alone. My aunt asked if I was still in that tiny apartment, even though I'd bought a house last year. Every detail about my life felt like an opportunity for them to poke and prod, while Jason and Amanda's every word was met with glowing praise. When Jason announced that they were starting another round of fertility treatments, my parents actually toasted to it, as if this was the most important update of the night. I smiled. But inside, I was fuming. It wasn't jealousy. It was the way my family had decided that my life was somehow less worthy of respect just because I hadn't given them a Hallmark card version of adulthood. I tried to focus on the food, the warmth of the fireplace, anything that could keep me from snapping back. And then the doorbell rang. All conversation stopped for a moment. My mom frowned and said, "Who's that?" My heart started pounding because I knew exactly who it was, and I hadn't warned anyone. The door opened, and there she was, my wife, Emily, stepping in with her coat still dusted with snow, holding our sleepy baby boy against her shoulder. "Sorry we're late," she said softly, her voice calm but carrying just enough for everyone to hear. Then she looked at me and smiled, that warm, grounding smile that never fails to calm me down. "Daddy, he's awake," she said, and gently passed our son to me. My son stretched his tiny arms toward me and said, clear as day, "Papa." You could hear a pin drop. Jason's smirk froze on his face. My mom's mouth fell open. My dad just blinked like he was processing what was happening. I held my son close, kissed his head, and looked around the room. That was the exact moment everything shifted. The silence in the room was almost funny. For years, my family had written me off as the screw-up who couldn't settle down, the guy who would probably end up alone with a cat. And now, here I was, holding my son, a living, breathing curveball, and watching their carefully built assumptions about me crack right down the middle. Emily stepped inside fully, brushing snow from her hair, and gave everyone a polite smile. "Hi, everyone," she said, as if this was just a normal family gathering and not a full-blown social earthquake. Mom was the first to recover. "Brian, you have a baby?" she stammered. "Yeah," I said simply, bouncing my son on my hip. "This is Nathan." Jason let out a low whistle. "Well, I'll be. You actually went and had a kid before me." His tone wasn't congratulatory. It was competitive, like I'd scored a point on him in some game he thought only he was playing. Amanda's face was frozen in that polite smile, but her eyes were darting between me, Emily, and the baby like she'd just seen someone sneak a dessert onto the table without saying grace first. Mom's voice shot up an octave. "Why didn't you tell us, Brian? This is huge. How long have you been married? When did this happen? Why would you hide something like this from us?" Her questions came rapid fire, like bullets, and suddenly everyone was staring, waiting for me to explain myself like a kid caught sneaking in past curfew. Emily glanced at me, sensing my tension, and squeezed my arm gently. I took a deep breath. "We didn't hide anything," I said, keeping my tone even. "We just wanted to enjoy some peace and quiet for a while. Not everything has to be a big production." Jason snorted. "Peace and quiet? What? You think you're some kind of celebrity who needs privacy? You couldn't even tell your own family." My jaw tightened. "Jason, we've been married for 2 years. We had a small ceremony, just a few close friends. We sent out announcements." "Not to us," Mom said sharply. I would have remembered. That stung, but it also made me want to laugh. "Mom, I mailed one to you guys. I even texted you pictures." Her brow furrowed. "I never saw them. I didn't push it. There was no point reminding her about the dozens of times my calls went unanswered or my texts got one-word replies. They had chosen to stay out of my life, and I had stopped chasing them for attention a long time ago." Nathan reached out and grabbed my shirt collar, babbling happily, and Emily smiled at him. The sight made my chest warm, but when I looked back at my family, their expressions were a mix of shock, suspicion, and something that felt dangerously close to resentment. Dinner turned into an interrogation. Between bites of turkey, my dad asked about my job like he was cross-examining me in court. "So your business is actually doing well enough to support a family?" "Yes," I said evenly. Jason leaned back in his chair with a smirk. "What is it again that you do? Selling stuff online, right?" "It's an e-commerce business, Jason," I said, resisting the urge to roll my eyes. "And yes, it's doing well. Better than I ever expected, actually." Amanda chimed in sweetly. "Must be nice not having to worry about student loans or real bills." Emily spoke up then, her voice calm but firm. "Brian worked 2 jobs for years to pay off those loans before we met. He's worked hard for everything we have." That shut Amanda up for a second, but I could feel the air getting colder. Jason changed the subject, or tried to. "So where's your house? Apartment? You guys live nearby." "We bought a house last year," I said. "About 20 minutes from here." Mom blinked, shocked again. "You bought a house and never told us." I set my fork down, my patience thinning. You didn't exactly ask, Mom. Every time I called, you were too busy telling me about Jason's job promotions or Amanda's spa weekends. After a while, I figured maybe you weren't interested. The words hung heavy in the air. Dad frowned. That's not fair. We care about you. I nodded slowly. Do you? Because tonight is the first time in 3 years anyone's asked me how I'm doing. And even then, it was followed by Jason mocking me for being single. Jason raised his hands defensively. Hey, it was a joke. Don't be so sensitive. Emily shot him a look that could have frozen lava. A joke at someone else's expense isn't a joke. For a moment, the only sound was the ticking of the kitchen clock. I could feel everyone squirming in their seats, not used to me talking back. I usually kept my head down, kept the peace, let Jason and my parents run the show. Not tonight. Then, just when I thought the tension might finally break, Grandma spoke up from the end of the table. She'd been quiet all night, but her words hit like a hammer. I think it's wonderful that Brian has a family now, she said. But maybe if he'd trusted us enough to tell us earlier, we wouldn't all be sitting here so shocked. The implication was clear. Somehow, this was my fault. I was the one who disrupted Thanksgiving with my secret wife and baby. I was the one who should have told them. Never mind that they'd made me feel like an outsider for years. Emily looked at me again, silently asking if we should leave. I shook my head. Not yet. Something inside me shifted that night. For years, I played the role they assigned me. The quiet son, the black sheep, the one they could laugh at to make themselves feel better. But as I sat there holding my son, listening to them try to twist this moment into something wrong, I felt a resolve settling into my bones. They wanted to act like they were owed access to my life, like they had some claim on my happiness just because we shared DNA. But the truth was, they hadn't been there for me when it mattered. And now that I finally had something good, a wife I adored, a son who lit up when he saw me, a business that gave us freedom, they thought they could just waltz back in and demand front row seats. Not this time. I smiled politely, nodded along to the rest of dinner, but inside, I was already making a decision. Things were going to change, and the next words out of Jason's mouth would be the final straw. Jason leaned back in his chair like he owned the room, one hand behind his head, the other swirling his wine. He was clearly enjoying the spectacle. The attention had shifted off him and Amanda's fertility updates and landed squarely on me. I could see that glint in his eyes, the one he always got before saying something meant to cut deep while pretending it was just teasing. So, he said loudly, making sure everyone was listening, "Are we even sure this kid is yours?" The words dropped like a bomb. For a moment, I thought I'd misheard him. Even Amanda's head snapped toward him, eyes wide, but he didn't back down. He smirked and shrugged. I mean, come on, Brian. You disappear for years, suddenly show up with a wife and a baby, and expect us to believe you didn't just rush into something because you were lonely? The air in the room thickened instantly. Emily froze, clutching her napkin so tightly her knuckles went white. My chest went hot, not the embarrassed kind of hot, but the kind that comes right before you lose your temper. Jason, my dad said warningly, but there was no real bite to it, more like a token scolding. I set my fork down slowly and looked right at Jason. Say that again, I said, my voice low, calm, too calm. Jason smirked wider. Relax, man. It was a joke. You know how many guys end up finding out the kid isn't theirs? It happens all the time. You're talking about my wife and my son, I said. Do you hear yourself right now? Amanda put a hand on Jason's arm, maybe trying to get him to stop, but he just shrugged her off. All I'm saying is it's convenient. You never said a word about dating anyone. You didn't invite us to the wedding, and now you show up like some hero with a baby on Thanksgiving? Forgive us for being skeptical. The table was dead silent. Even Grandma stopped chewing. Emily spoke, her voice icy but measured. I think we've heard enough, Jason. But he wasn't done. Hey, I'm just saying what everyone's thinking. Brian's always been the irresponsible one, skipping family events, running off to do his own thing, never keeping us in the loop. Now suddenly he's the perfect family man? I mean, come on. It's a little hard to swallow. That did it. I set Nathan gently in his high chair. Emily had brought it in from the car earlier and stood up. My chair scraped against the floor, loud enough to make everyone flinch. You know what, Jason? I said, staring him down. You've been jealous of me since we were kids, but I never thought you'd stoop this low. Jealous? He laughed, actually laughed. Of you? Please, what do you have that I'd ever want? I took a step closer to him, keeping my voice even. A life that isn't built on tearing other people down. A wife who actually loves me. A son who will grow up knowing his dad didn't waste his life competing with his brother. Jason's smirk faltered, just for a second, but then Mom jumped in. All right, that's enough. Brian, sit down. Jason was out of line, but there's no need to make a scene. I turned to her slowly. A scene? He just questioned the paternity of your grandson, and you're worried about a scene. Mom looked flustered. This is Thanksgiving. We don't need drama at the table. That was the moment I realized where I stood in this family. Jason could humiliate me, insult my wife, even imply my son wasn't mine, and Mom's priority was keeping the dinner peaceful. Emily reached for my hand under the table, a silent reminder not to let them get the best of me. I sat back down, not because they told me to, but because I wanted to control how this played out. Dinner limped on after that, but the air was thick with tension. No one looked me in the eye except Grandma, who gave me a faint nod. Whether it was approval or pity, I couldn't tell. Jason avoided my gaze completely now, focusing on his plate, though every now and then he muttered something under his breath to Amanda that made her purse her lips and glance at us with that sharp little look of hers. Then came dessert. Pumpkin pie, apple pie, whipped cream, the works. Normally my favorite part of the night, but this time, it was just another stage for Jason to perform on. So, Brian, he said as Mom sliced the pies, you planning on baptizing the kid? Or are you going to keep that a secret too? Emily stiffened, but before I could answer, Mom jumped in. Oh, that's a good question. We'll need to know so we can plan the family gathering. I looked at her, stunned. Plan? Mom, you haven't been to any of the milestones in my life so far. What makes you think you're entitled to this one? Mom's face went red. Entitled? We're your family. Exactly, I said quietly. Which is why it hurts that the only time you all pay attention to me is when there's something you can criticize. Jason let out a low whistle again, clearly enjoying the fallout now that he'd stirred the pot. Guess you're still the sensitive one, he said. Emily turned to him, her voice calm but cutting. Or maybe he's just tired of being treated like the family punching bag. Amanda shifted uncomfortably. Nobody's treating him like that, she said weakly. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was absurd. You've all been doing it all night. And for years before that. But I guess it's easier to paint me as the problem than to admit that maybe this family isn't as perfect as it thinks it is. The room went quiet again. I glanced at the clock. We'd been there less than 2 hours, but it felt like a lifetime. Nathan was fussing now, probably sensing the tension, and Emily began packing up his things without a word. Mom looked panicked. You're not leaving, are you? We still have dessert. Emily smiled politely. I think we've had enough for tonight. Nathan needs to get to bed. Jason muttered, just loud enough for me to hear. Or maybe Daddy just can't handle a little heat. I stopped in my tracks, turned back, and met his eyes one last time. Careful, Jason, I said softly. You keep pushing, and one day you're going to find out I'm not the same kid you used to pick on. And you won't like what happens next. His smirk finally faltered for good. We left shortly after, the cold night air hitting my face like a reset button. Emily squeezed my hand as we walked to the car. You okay? She asked softly. I nodded, though my jaw was still clenched. Yeah, I'm just done letting them treat me like this. Things are going to change. And for the first time in years, I meant it. Because this wasn't just about Thanksgiving anymore. This was about setting boundaries, about finally standing up for the life I'd built, and making sure they understood that they didn't get to belittle it anymore. The next time I saw my family, I wouldn't just be defending myself. I'd be making a point they'd never forget. The drive home that night felt longer than usual. Nathan had fallen asleep in his car seat, his little chest rising and falling softly, completely unaware of the storm brewing inside his father. Emily kept one hand on my knee the whole way, saying nothing, just letting me sit with my thoughts. Normally, I hated silence. It left too much room for the past to creep in, but tonight, I needed it. I needed to hear the thoughts I'd been pushing away for years. I thought about every Thanksgiving, every Christmas, every family barbecue where I'd been the punchline. Jason's jokes about me never settling down. Dad's condescending little comments about how he was just waiting for me to get serious about life. Mom's constant comparisons between me and Jason, like we were contestants in some endless competition for her approval. I'd spent my 20s bending over backward trying to prove myself. I took every extra shift I could get, worked 2 jobs just to save enough money to start my business. I didn't ask them for help, not once, because I wanted them to see me as independent, capable, worth respecting. And still, every time I showed up, I was treated like the kid brother who could never measure up. I gripped the steering wheel a little tighter as I remembered last year's Christmas, the one I'd skipped. Jason had posted photos on Facebook of the whole family in matching pajamas, opening gifts, smiling like a Hallmark card. Not a single person had texted to ask why I wasn't there. It had been easier to sit alone in my apartment than to face that room full of fake cheer and barbed jokes. When we got home, Emily carried Nathan upstairs while I sat down on the couch, staring at the darkened TV. The house was warm and quiet, everything we had worked so hard to build together. Emily came back down a few minutes later, sat next to me, and tucked her legs under her. "You handled yourself better than I think I would have," she said softly. I let out a humorless laugh. I didn't feel like I handled anything. I just sat there and let them drag me through the mud. "You stood up for yourself," she said, reaching over to take my hand. "I saw the look on your brother's face. He's not used to you pushing back. That was something." I shook my head. It didn't feel like enough. Jason sat there implying Nathan wasn't even mine. And my parents, acted like I was the one ruining Thanksgiving. Like I was the problem for not telling them about you, about the house, about our son. And the worst part is, I knew this would happen. That's why I didn't tell them. That's why I kept our life separate. Emily stayed quiet, letting me get it out. "I'm just tired," I said finally, the words heavy in my throat. "I'm tired of being the outsider in my own family. I'm tired of acting like I'm okay with their little digs, their passive-aggressive comments, their way of pretending Jason is perfect, and I'm just the screw-up who got lucky. I'm tired of showing up to these dinners hoping this time will be different and leaving feeling like I got punched in the gut." Emily squeezed my hand. "Then stop showing up," she said simply. The idea sat between us like a stone. "Stop showing up." "I can't just cut them off," I said automatically, even as the thought took root. "Why not?" Emily asked gently. "What are you getting out of this, Brian? Every time we go over there, you come home miserable. You spend the next week replaying every insult in your head. And then you go back and let them do it again. For what? Because it's tradition?" Her words weren't angry, but they hit hard because they were true. Tradition, obligation, guilt. Those had been the strings pulling me back to that house year after year, no matter how much it hurt. That night, after Emily went to bed, I stayed up late, sitting in the dark with nothing but the hum of the refrigerator for company. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through old photos. Nathan's first steps, his first birthday, Emily's radiant smile at our tiny wedding ceremony. And it hit me like a punch to the chest how much they'd missed. Not just because I hadn't told them, but because they hadn't cared enough to ask. The next morning, I woke up with a heaviness in my chest, but also a strange clarity. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like running back to smooth things over. I didn't feel the urge to call Mom and explain myself, or to text Jason some half-hearted joke to diffuse the tension. I just let the silence sit. Days passed. Mom sent a single text 2 days later. "We missed you at dessert. Hope Nathan's doing okay." No mention of the things Jason had said. No apology. Just an attempt to pretend nothing had happened. I didn't reply. Jason, on the other hand, posted a photo on social media with the caption, "Great Thanksgiving with the family." Well, most of it. The comments were full of their friends cooing about how cute Amanda looked, how they couldn't wait for Jason to have kids of his own. I scrolled past it without liking it. The more distance I put between myself and them, the clearer everything became. For years, I'd been so desperate for their approval that I'd let them define my worth. Every success I had felt like it needed to be presented to them like a trophy. Every failure felt like confirmation of their low expectations. But now I had my own little family. Emily and Nathan didn't need me to prove anything. They just needed me to show up, to be present, to love them. And I did. The more I focused on that, the less power my parents and Jason had over me. And yet, as freeing as it felt, there was still a hollow ache in my chest every time I thought about how easily they dismissed what Jason said. How no one, not my mom, not my dad, not even grandma, had defended me. It wasn't just about respect anymore. It was about dignity. One night, about a week later, I was working late in my office when Emily came in with a mug of tea. "You've been quiet all week," she said, sitting on the edge of my desk. I nodded. I've been thinking. About Thanksgiving? About everything, I admitted. About how they treat me. About how they treat you. About how they're going to treat Nathan one day if we keep letting them have access to us without any boundaries. Emily's expression softened. What do you want to do? I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling for a long moment before answering. I want them to understand. Not just that they hurt me. They'll never care about that. I want them to understand that they don't get to treat me like this and still expect me to show up smiling. I want them to feel the weight of what they've done. Emily tilted her head, a little cautious but also curious. That sounds like more than just staying away. I smiled faintly. It is. I think it's time to stop playing defense. Time to set the record straight. That night, I sat down and started writing. Not a text, not an email, but a letter, long, detailed, honest. Every memory of being dismissed, every comment that stuck in my head long after the dinner ended, every moment I swallowed my pride to keep the peace. I didn't know yet if I was going to send it, but writing it out felt like taking control back, piece by piece. I didn't just want them to know how I felt. I wanted them to see the version of me they'd never bothered to see. The husband, the father, the man who built something from nothing. And as the days turned into weeks, something else started happening. The calls started coming more frequently. First Mom, then Dad, then even Jason. At first it was just checking in. Then it was casual invitations. You should bring Nathan by. We got him a little present. Then it was guilt. Your grandma misses you. She's been asking why you don't visit anymore. I stayed silent. And the silence began to get to them. I didn't realize how much weight I'd been carrying until I stopped answering their calls. At first, it felt wrong, like I was breaking some sacred rule of family, the one that said you had to keep showing up no matter how miserable it made you. But as the days stretched into weeks, I started breathing easier. The house felt lighter, the air clearer. For the first time in years, I could enjoy a weekend without dreading the next family event. Saturday mornings became pancake breakfasts with Emily and Nathan, music playing in the kitchen while Nathan sat in his high chair banging a spoon against the tray like it was a drum. We took walks in the park, visited the farmer's market, stayed up late watching movies. We built our own rhythms, our own traditions. My business was growing too. December was my busiest season, and I threw myself into it. Orders were flying in faster than I could fulfill them, and for once, it felt good to be completely absorbed in something that was mine. Late nights weren't a burden. They were a reminder of how far I'd come since the days of scraping together rent. Emily noticed the change in me before I did. One night, after we'd put Nathan to bed, she sat next to me on the couch and said, "You seem lighter." I looked at her, confused. "Lighter?" "Yeah," she said with a small smile. "Happier. You're not carrying that heaviness anymore. The one you always have after we visit your family." I leaned back and let her words sink in. She was right. I felt taller somehow, like I'd been walking hunched over without realizing it. But just because I was thriving didn't mean my family was done with me. If anything, the quieter I got, the louder they became. It started with small things, a text from Mom asking if we could come by to pick up some things she had for Nathan. I didn't answer. A few days later, Dad left a voicemail saying there was a big family announcement coming up and it wouldn't be right if I wasn't there. Again, I stayed silent. Then Jason called. That one surprised me. Jason never called me directly unless he wanted to brag or borrow something. "Hey man," he said when I finally let it go to voicemail. "Look, about Thanksgiving. I didn't mean to go too far. You know me, I just joke around. Anyway, Mom's getting kind of worried about you going radio silent. Just give her a call, all right?" The message wasn't an apology, not really. It was Jason trying to sweep everything under the rug, to reset things back to the way they'd always been. But I wasn't interested in going back. I let the silence stretch longer. And that's when they started to get desperate. First came the gifts. Packages showed up at our door, baby clothes, toys, books, all with little notes from Mom saying things like, "For our sweet grandson." Emily opened them politely, but set them aside. "She's trying to buy her way back in," she said, not unkindly, just stating the truth. Then came the guilt. Grandma called, her voice wavering. "Brian, sweetheart, I don't know what's going on between you and your parents, but you can't just stay away forever. Family is family." I almost broke then. Almost. But I thought about Thanksgiving. About Jason's smirk, Mom's demand that I sit down and keep the peace, Dad's silence through it all. I thought about Nathan growing up watching me swallow my pride just to keep everyone else comfortable. "Grandma," I said gently, "I love you, but I can't come back until things change. And right now, I don't think anyone wants to change." There was a long pause on the other end. "They'll never change if you stay away," she said softly. "Maybe," I said, "but I won't change if I go back." After that, I threw myself even harder into building something better. My business hit record numbers that quarter. I hired 2 part-time assistants to keep up with orders. Emily and I started talking seriously about buying a second property, an investment for Nathan's future. It felt like everything was clicking into place. And that's when my parents tried to pull me back in one last time. It was late January when I got the text. "Mom, again. We're hosting a dinner next weekend. Jason and Amanda have big news. It would mean a lot if you came." I stared at the message for a long time. Emily came up behind me, read it over my shoulder, and said, "Are you going to respond?" "I don't know," I admitted. Part of me wants to ignore it like all the others. But part of me thinks maybe it's time. "Time for what?" Emily asked gently. I turned to look at her, feeling something solidify inside me. Time to stop hiding. Time to show them exactly who we are. That week, I prepared carefully. I wasn't just going to show up. I was going to walk in on my own terms. I bought Nathan a tiny button-up shirt and little shoes that made him look like a miniature gentleman. Emily wore the navy dress I loved, the one that made her look effortlessly put together. And I put on the watch I'd bought myself after my business turned its first big profit, a reminder of what I'd built and how far I'd come without their help. When we pulled up to my parents' house, my heart was beating faster than I wanted to admit. Emily squeezed my hand as we walked to the door. "You ready?" she asked. "Yeah," I said, and I meant it. The door opened, and there they were, Mom, Dad, Jason, Amanda, even Grandma, all waiting like we were the main event. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Mom stepped forward, a little too brightly. "Brian, you came." I smiled politely. Of course, wouldn't miss it. As we stepped inside, I could feel every eye on us. Nathan clung to my shoulder, looking around curiously, and Emily greeted everyone with quiet warmth. Jason was the first to break the silence. "Well, look who finally decided to show up." I smiled at him, calm and steady. "Yeah, we figured it was time." Something in my tone must have thrown him off, because for once, he didn't have a quick comeback. Dinner started off civil enough, but I could feel the tension buzzing under the surface. This wasn't just a meal. This was a test, one I didn't intend to fail. Jason eventually stood up, cleared his throat, and made his announcement. Amanda was pregnant. The room erupted into cheers and congratulations, and I meant it when I said, "That's great news." But as I watched my parents fawn over them, showering them with praise, I couldn't help but notice the difference in how they'd reacted to my own family news. And that's when I knew this night was going to be the turning point. Not just for me, for all of us. Because I wasn't here just to eat dinner. I was here to change everything. Dinner that night felt almost surreal. The clinking of silverware, the polite laughter, it all seemed louder than usual, like everyone was trying too hard to make it seem normal. Jason basked in the attention, Amanda glowing beside him as my parents peppered them with questions about due dates, names, nursery plans. For a while, I just sat there quietly, letting it wash over me. Emily squeezed my hand under the table and gave me a knowing look, the kind that said, "I see what's happening here, and I know you're holding it together by sheer willpower." Eventually, the questions turned to us. Mom leaned forward, her voice artificially sweet. "So, Brian, what's new with you two? Any news you'd like to share?" The room went quiet, all eyes on me. I smiled politely. "Business has been good. We've been talking about some investments for the future, maybe a vacation this summer. And Nathan just learned how to say truck, which he's very proud of." There was polite laughter, but I could see it, the faint flicker of disappointment in Mom's face, like she'd been hoping for something bigger, something to match Jason's announcement. And then, like fate itself wanted to give me ammunition, Dad spoke. "Well, I hope you're saving your money. Things are going to get tighter around here once Jason and Amanda's baby comes. Your mother and I promised to help them with the down payment on a bigger house, somewhere the baby can have a yard to play in." I froze. Jason nodded, grinning. "Yeah, we found a place we love. A little over budget, but with Mom and Dad helping out, we should be able to swing it. We're hoping to close by spring." I stared at my parents. You're helping them buy a house? Mom didn't even flinch. Of course we are. It's our first grandchild. Well, their first child, she corrected quickly. They need the space. Emily's hand tightened around mine, but I kept my voice level. When I bought my house, you told me I was being reckless. You said I should wait until I had a real family to justify that kind of expense. Mom pursed her lips. You didn't ask for help. You didn't offer, I said quietly. Jason rolled his eyes. Oh, come on, Brian. Are you really going to make this about you? This isn't a competition. I laughed under my breath. Isn't it? Because somehow it always feels like one. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Grandma, bless her, cleared her throat. Maybe we should change the subject. We're supposed to be celebrating tonight. And just like that, the conversation moved on, but my mind didn't. On the drive home, I couldn't stop thinking about what Dad had said. The house, the down payment, the way my parents were willing to dig into their savings for Jason without hesitation, but had treated my milestones like inconveniences. When we got home and put Nathan to bed, Emily and I sat in the living room, the glow of the lamp casting warm shadows on the walls. You're quiet, she said gently. I ran a hand through my hair. They're helping Jason buy a house. I know, she said softly. They didn't even think twice about it. I said, my voice sharper than I intended. When I bought ours, they told me I was being stupid, that I was rushing. And now? They're practically throwing money at him. Emily tilted her head. So what are you thinking? I looked at her, feeling something cold and steady settle into place. I'm thinking I'm done letting them write the narrative. I'm done letting Jason play the golden child while they treat me like an afterthought. If they want a competition, fine. I'll give them one they'll never forget. That night, I stayed up late going through my files, business records, tax returns, contracts. My company had grown more than anyone in my family realized. I'd reinvested nearly everything back into it, and now it was finally paying off. I started making calls the next morning. Not to my family, to my accountant, my lawyer, my realtor. Think of it as future-proofing, I told Emily when she asked what I was doing. Over the next few weeks, I worked quietly, carefully. I expanded my business's operations, finalized a deal that had been in the works for months, and moved a sizable chunk of my profits into a trust, one that would eventually be Nathan's. The more I worked, the more focused I became. Every dismissive comment, every joke at my expense, every time they'd made me feel small, it all fueled me. And as if the universe was conspiring to push me over the edge, Jason just couldn't help himself. He called one night out of the blue, his voice smug. Just thought you'd like to know we got the house, he said. Big backyard, 2-car garage, the works. You should see Nathan's face when he comes over. He's going to love it. I let him talk, let him go on about paint colors and nursery plans. Then, just as he was about to hang up, he said it. Guess you should have stuck closer to the family, huh? Might have gotten a little help yourself. And then he laughed. When I hung up, I sat there in the dark for a long time, staring at the wall. That's it, I said finally, out loud, to no one. I'm done. Emily found me in the office later that night, typing furiously at my computer. What are you doing? She asked. Making sure that the next time we walk into that house, I said, my voice calm but steely. They'll finally see me for who I really am. Not the screw-up. Not the punchline. The man who doesn't need their approval or their money to build something bigger than they ever imagined. Emily's eyes softened. Just promise me you won't let this turn ugly. I smiled, but there was no humor in it. Oh, it won't be ugly. It'll be educational. Because now I had everything I needed. The success, the leverage, the truth. All that was left was the perfect moment to reveal it. And I had a feeling that moment was coming soon. The opportunity came faster than I expected. About a month after Jason's call, Mom sent out a group message. Family dinner next Sunday. Housewarming for Jason and Amanda. Everyone is invited. The message was cheerful, full of exclamation marks, but I could read between the lines. This wasn't just a housewarming. This was an event to showcase Jason's perfect life, to parade him as the golden child one more time. Emily looked up from her phone when I told her. You're going? She asked. Oh, I'm going, I said. But this time, we're not walking in as spectators. In the week leading up to the dinner, I prepared carefully. I wasn't planning some childish outburst or shouting match that would only prove their point. No, this was going to be measured, controlled, and impossible to ignore. First, I gathered everything I needed. My company's growth reports, the finalized contract for my most recent business deal, and the paperwork for the new property we had just closed on, a lakeside cabin I'd been eyeing for months. It wasn't just a luxury purchase. It was an investment that would appreciate for Nathan's future. Then, I called my lawyer and accountant, making sure all my paperwork was airtight. I didn't want to just talk about my success. I wanted to present it like evidence, undeniable and concrete. Emily helped me pick out my outfit the morning of the dinner. Nothing too flashy, just a well-tailored blazer, clean shoes, the watch that symbolized my turning point. Nathan wore a tiny vest and bow tie that made him look like he was headed to a gala instead of a housewarming party. When we pulled up to Jason's new house, I had to admit, it was nice. Big yard, fresh paint, the kind of place that screamed suburban dream. There were already cars lining the driveway and neighbors milling about, congratulating Jason and Amanda. Mom's face lit up when she saw us walking up the path. Nathan perched on my hip. "Brian, you made it." I smiled warmly. "Wouldn't miss it." Jason came out, grinning like a politician. Well, look who decided to join the celebration." "Congratulations," I said, shaking his hand. Beautiful house. Inside, the place was buzzing with conversation. Jason led everyone on a grand tour, pointing out the crown molding, the granite countertops, the nursery that was already half set up. Mom and Dad trailed behind, beaming with pride. When we all finally gathered in the living room, Jason raised a glass. "Thanks, everyone, for coming. This house is the start of a new chapter for us. Couldn't have done it without Mom and Dad's help. Seriously, you guys made this possible." There was applause, cheers, toasts. And then, like the floor was finally mine, Mom turned to me. "So, Brian, what's new with you? Business still keeping you busy?" I smiled slowly. "Actually, yeah. It's been a big couple of months." Jason snorted softly. "Oh yeah? What?" "Sold a few more t-shirts online." I didn't bite. Instead, I pulled a thin folder from the inside of my blazer and set it on the coffee table. "We just finalized a major contract with a national distributor. Projected revenue for this year is nearly triple what it was last year." The room went quiet. Dad blinked. "Triple?" I nodded. "Which is why we decided it was time to make some moves." I pulled out another sheet, the deed to the lakeside cabin. "We closed on a second property last week. It's a cabin about an hour from here. Private dock, great for weekends with Nathan. And eventually, it'll be his. Part of the trust we set up for him." Amanda's mouth actually dropped open. Jason's smirk faltered. "That's impressive," Dad said finally, sounding almost startled. Emily smiled and rested a hand on my shoulder. "Brian's worked really hard for this. He built all of it from the ground up." Jason cleared his throat, trying to recover. "Well, good for you, man. Guess all that time hiding away finally paid off." I looked at him steadily. It wasn't hiding. It was working, and building a life that didn't need your approval to matter. For once, Jason had no comeback. But I wasn't done. I turned to my parents. "You know, when I bought our first house, you told me I was being reckless. You said I should wait until I had a family. Now you're helping Jason buy one, and that's fine. I don't need your money. I never did. But I think you should know something. Every time you doubted me, every time you made me feel like I was the irresponsible one, it just pushed me harder. I didn't get here in spite of you. I got here because you taught me exactly what kind of life I didn't want to have." Mom's face went pale. Dad looked like he wanted to say something, but no words came out. "I'm not telling you this to brag," I continued, keeping my voice calm. "I'm telling you this because I'm done letting you treat me like the family disappointment. I'm not. I have a wife I adore, a son who is my whole world, and a business that's thriving. And if you can't respect that, respect us, then we won't be part of this family drama anymore." You could have heard a pin drop. Grandma was the first to speak, her voice quiet but steady. "You're right," she said. "You are not the disappointment, Brian. You never were." Mom opened her mouth, closed it, then finally said, "We just wanted you close. You wanted me obedient," I said gently. "And I can't be that for you anymore." I stood up, taking Emily's hand. "We should get going. Nathan needs to get to bed." As we left, I felt the weight of a dozen eyes on my back. Jason didn't say another word. Neither did my parents. But for the first time in my life, I didn't feel small walking out of their house. I felt 10 feet tall. And though I'd said my piece, I knew this wasn't over. Because the silence that followed would be louder than anything I'd said that night. and I was ready to let them sit with it. The drive home from Jason's house that night felt completely different from Thanksgiving. Back then, I'd driven home burning with humiliation, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles ached. This time, there was no anger left, just a quiet, calm satisfaction. Emily held my hand the whole way, and Nathan babbled sleepily in the back seat until he drifted off. "You were incredible," Emily said softly. I let out a slow breath, almost a laugh. I didn't even raise my voice. "You didn't need to," she said. "You finally made them see you." That night, for the first time in years, I slept without replaying every word in my head. No second guessing, no wondering if I should have stayed quiet. I woke up the next morning feeling lighter, clearer, almost giddy. And then the call started. First it was Mom. 2 missed calls, then a text. "Can we talk? Please." I waited. Then Dad called. Left a voicemail this time. "Son, we should sit down. Work this out like adults. Call me back." Jason, of course, couldn't resist being Jason. He texted, "Nice performance last night. Hope it was worth making Mom cry." I stared at the message for a long time, then put the phone down without replying. Over the next week, the pressure increased. Mom sent long, rambling texts about how she never meant to make me feel less than and just wanted the family to be close. Dad sent articles about the importance of family bonds, like I was writing a term paper on forgiveness. Even Amanda reached out with a cautious, "Jason knows he went too far. He's embarrassed." But the apology I wanted never came. Not once did Jason say, "I'm sorry for what I said about your wife and son." Not once did my parents admit that they had treated me unfairly for years. And that was how I knew nothing had really changed, at least not for them. So I made a decision. I sat down and wrote a letter. Not angry, not bitter, just firm. I thanked them for inviting us to the housewarming, told them how proud I was of the life I'd built, and explained, clearly, that until there was real accountability, until there were real apologies, we would be taking a step back. Emily read it over my shoulder, nodded, and said, "It's perfect." I printed it, sealed it, and mailed it. No text, no email. If they wanted to have a conversation, they would have to do it face to face. And then I waited. Weeks passed. At first, there was silence. Then, one by one, the cracks started to show. Grandma called me first. "I read your letter," she said quietly. "And I think you were right. They've treated you unfairly. I told your father as much." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Thank you. They're not taking it well," she said. "But they're thinking about it. Your mother's been crying. Your father hasn't stopped pacing." I pictured them both in that house, stewing, realizing that their favorite scapegoat wasn't coming back until they changed. And then one night, the doorbell rang. Emily looked at me from the kitchen. "Are you expecting anyone?" I shook my head. When I opened the door, Mom was standing there. She looked smaller than I remembered, her coat buttoned up to her chin, her eyes red. "Brian," she said softly. "Mom," I said, keeping my voice neutral. She stood there for a moment, wringing her hands, then finally said, "I came to say I'm sorry. For everything. For not listening. For letting Jason talk to you like that. For not being the kind of mother you needed." I just stood there, letting her words sink in. For years, I had dreamed about this. Not to gloat, not to punish her, but just to hear those words. "Come in," I said finally. She stepped inside, and we sat at the kitchen table. Emily joined us, silent but supportive. Mom took a deep breath. "When you walked out of Jason's house, I realized something," she said. "I realized that I've been so focused on keeping the peace, on making sure everyone looked perfect from the outside, that I didn't see what it was doing to you. I let Jason get away with things I never should have, and I made you feel like you were less than. I hate that I did that." I nodded slowly. "It hurt. For a long time." "I know," she said quietly, "and I want to make it right." For the first time, I believed her. The next weekend, Dad came by. His apology was clumsier, less eloquent, but it was real. "You were right," he said gruffly. "We pushed you too hard. And I let Jason run his mouth when I should have shut him down. Won't happen again." Even Jason eventually called, though it took him the longest. "Look," he said awkwardly. I was out of line. What I said about Emily and Nathan was wrong. "I'm sorry. Thank you," I said simply. He hesitated. "Are we good?" I thought about it. "We will be. But it's going to take time." And for once, he didn't argue. Over the next few months, things slowly started to shift. The jokes stopped, at least the mean-spirited ones. The conversations became more balanced. When we went to visit, Mom asked about my business with genuine interest. Dad played with Nathan on the floor, building block towers with him until he squealed with laughter. It wasn't perfect, families rarely are, but it was progress. The next Thanksgiving, we hosted dinner at our house. I cooked the turkey. Emily made her famous mashed potatoes, and our dining room was filled with the sound of conversation and laughter that, for once, didn't feel forced. At one point, Jason raised his glass and said, "To Brian and Emily, thanks for having us, and for putting up with me all these years." Everyone laughed, but this time, it wasn't sharp or mocking. When dessert was finished and everyone was sitting back in their chairs, I looked around the table, at my parents, my brother, my wife, my son, and felt a peace I hadn't felt in years. And as I stood to clear the dishes, I said quietly, almost to myself, but just loud enough for them to hear, "This is what family is supposed to feel like." And for the first time, nobody disagreed. "Hey, I'm Alex. I'm not the one to make a big deal out of things, but this situation with my parents has been spiraling out of control, and I can't keep quiet about it anymore." My parents, John and Linda, are the kind of people who think they can talk their way out of anything, that if they say it enough times, people will just give in. I've always been the responsible child in the family, the one they relied on when things got tough. But they didn't always see it that way. You see, growing up, I watched them make one bad decision after another. They couldn't hold onto money to save their lives, overspending on luxuries they didn't need, never budgeting properly, always living beyond their means. Every time they'd come to me with their hands out, asking for help, I'd lend them money or help with their bills, thinking that eventually they'd get their act together. But they didn't. They just kept digging themselves deeper. Now, I'm 30, I have my own place, and I've worked hard to build something for myself. It's not a mansion, but it's mine. A little two-bedroom house in a quiet neighborhood, just enough space for me to feel comfortable. I've been living here for a few years now, and it's the first time in my life that I've felt like I've finally made it. But of course, my parents didn't see it that way. It all started a few months ago when they showed up on my doorstep, unannounced. I wasn't expecting them. I had just gotten back from a long day at work, tired as hell, and when I opened the door, there they were, standing in front of me with those sheepish, apologetic smiles they always put on when they wanted something. "Hey, Alex," my dad said, his voice a little more hesitant than usual. "We need to talk." "Yeah?" I asked, trying to mask the exhaustion in my voice. I didn't have time for another one of their help us out requests, but I could tell this was different. The look on their faces was serious. "Can we come in?" "We need to discuss something important," my mom added, a little too eagerly. I stepped aside, letting them into the living room, already bracing myself for whatever they had planned. I couldn't say no. I was always the one they turned to when things fell apart. But this time, something in my gut told me it wasn't going to be a simple request. We sat down, and the conversation started innocently enough. They tried to ease into it, talking about how hard things had been for them lately. It wasn't the first time they'd complained about financial struggles, but this time, it seemed different. "We've been going through a rough patch," my dad began. "You know how it is. The economy's been tough, and we made some bad decisions. But we're trying to fix it." I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. I didn't want to sound too cynical, but I'd heard this all before. There was always an excuse, always something that had caused their problems. Then, they dropped the bombshell. "We've been looking at our options, and we were hoping you could help us out." My mom looked at me with those puppy dog eyes that always made me feel guilty. "Alex, we're not asking for money this time. We need a place to stay." I blinked, caught off guard. "What? A place to stay? What do you mean?" My dad chimed in, his voice getting a little more desperate. "Our finances are completely shot, Alex. We can't keep up with the bills anymore, and we don't have anywhere else to go. We were thinking, maybe we could move in with you, just for a little while until we get back on our feet." I froze. My heart sank. They were asking me, no, demanding me to let them move into my home? I was speechless for a second. I could feel the weight of their words pressing down on me. This wasn't just about a temporary favor. No, they were planning to stay indefinitely. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my cool. "I don't know, Mom, Dad. I don't think that's a good idea. I have my own space, and I've worked really hard to make this my home. I don't think I can just take you both in. You've been here before, and it's always been temporary. But this time," my mom's face shifted instantly from desperate to defensive. "What are you saying, Alex? You're our child. We raised you, gave you everything we had, and now that we need help, You can't even offer us a roof over our heads. I could feel the guilt trip coming, and it hit me like a ton of bricks. It's not like that. It's just, you owe us, Alex, she snapped, cutting me off. All those years we spent raising you, sacrificing for you, and now you can't even do this one thing for us? I was taken aback by her tone. This wasn't the mother who used to tell me I could always count on her. This was something else. She wasn't asking for help, she was demanding it, as if I was obligated. My dad jumped in then, his voice more forceful. This is what family does, Alex. You help out when it counts. You can't just leave us out in the cold. You have no idea how hard things are right now. I was getting angry now. I understand you're struggling, but that doesn't mean I'm required to put my life on hold for you. I'm not your safety net. Their faces darkened, the smiles from earlier vanishing. Well, if you're not willing to help us, my dad said, his tone shifting, I guess we'll have to figure out something else. There was a pause as I stared at them, realizing that this wasn't just about moving in anymore. They were about to pull out all the stops to make me feel guilty enough to cave in. I'm not saying no, but you're asking for a lot here, I replied, trying to stay calm, but inside I was already feeling the tension build. We're your parents, Alex, my mom said, standing up. You owe us for everything we've done for you. All we're asking for is a place to stay while we get back on our feet. I could feel the heat rising in my chest, my patience slipping away. This wasn't just a simple request anymore. It was a full-on demand, and my parents were acting like I had no right to say no. It was like they thought I owed them everything just because they raised me. And that's where they were wrong. I'm not going to let you just move in here like it's nothing, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I've worked hard for this place, and it's mine. I'm not in a position to take on both of you. My dad shook his head, like he couldn't believe what he was hearing. You really don't get it, do you? This isn't just about you anymore. It's about family. You're turning your back on us when we need you the most. How could you live with yourself knowing we're struggling, and you have the means to help? My mom joined in, her voice dripping with fake sadness. I'm so disappointed in you, Alex. We've always supported you, and now when it's our turn, you can't even give us a place to stay? I guess you don't care about us the way we cared about you. She wiped away an exaggerated tear, making sure I saw it. The guilt tripping was thick, but it wasn't working. I'd had enough. This was the same act I'd seen 100 times before, and I wasn't buying it anymore. You've made terrible financial decisions, and now it's my responsibility to fix it? I said, my voice sharp. I can't help you just because you spent all your money on stupid things. I stood up, feeling the weight of the conversation finally settling on me. Look, I'm sorry things are tough, but you're not coming here. You need to figure this out on your own. I'm not your fallback. There was a long silence. My parents exchanged a glance, and I could tell that their plan to emotionally manipulate me was starting to unravel. But instead of backing down, they doubled down. My dad let out a long, frustrated sigh. I can't believe you're making this so difficult. You don't understand what it's like to be in our shoes. He stood up and paced a little, rubbing his forehead. You're making us out to be the villains here, but all we're doing is asking for help. What kind of child refuses to help their parents in need? I felt the anger bubbling up again. You're not helpless. You're just irresponsible. And I'm not going to let you guilt me into giving you a free ride. At that point, I was done. I'd had enough of their manipulation, their guilt trips, their sense of entitlement. But I wasn't prepared for what came next. My parents didn't take rejection well. The next morning, I woke up to a surprise. As I was making my coffee in the kitchen, I heard a knock at the door. It was way too early for anyone to be visiting, especially with the drama from the night before still fresh in my mind. I figured it was probably my parents again, coming to beg, but I wasn't ready to deal with them yet. I opened the door, and sure enough, there they were, both standing on my front porch with stern faces. We need to talk, my dad said, without even so much as a greeting. Not now. I don't want to do this again, I replied, ready to shut the door. But before I could, my mom stepped forward, blocking the entrance. You're not getting away with this, Alex, she said, her voice cold and firm. We're not leaving until you do the right thing. I could feel my stomach drop. I'd been expecting some kind of escalation, but this was beyond what I thought they'd do. They were literally trying to force their way into my house. What are you talking about? I said, confused but increasingly alarmed. We've thought about it, and we're not leaving until you let us move in, my dad said, his tone final. You can't just push us away like this. We're your parents. You owe us. You have to help us. Dad, get out of the way, I said, trying to keep my cool. This is my home, and I've told you, but they didn't move. My mom stepped forward, her eyes narrowed in frustration. You don't understand. We have nowhere else to go. We can't keep living like this. If you don't help us, then you're no better than the people who've abandoned us. You owe us this, Alex. Don't make us beg. It was becoming clear they weren't leaving anytime soon. I took a step back, suddenly feeling cornered. I could hear my heart pounding in my chest. This wasn't just a request anymore. It was a demand, and they weren't going to take no for an answer. Stop. I'm telling you, leave. Now, I said, my voice shaking with anger. But they stood there, unmoving. This wasn't about family anymore. This was about control. And they weren't going to stop until they had their way. I could feel my blood boiling. I wasn't going to back down. They couldn't just barge in and take over my life like this. This was no longer a simple family disagreement. This was an invasion of my space, my life, and my peace of mind. I took a deep breath, trying to remain calm, but my patience was wearing thinner by the second. I'm not doing this anymore, I said, my voice steady despite the anger bubbling inside me. I've asked you nicely. I've tried to reason with you. But now you're forcing this on me. And I'm done. I'm calling the cops. Both of them froze. For a moment, there was silence. My dad looked at me, almost as if I had slapped him. He blinked a few times, his face turning red with a mix of frustration and disbelief. You're calling the cops, he said, his voice rising. You're going to call the police on your own parents? My mom stepped forward, her expression hardening. This is how you repay us? After everything we've done for you? You're going to call the cops because we need help. Her voice was thick with outrage, but there was also a hint of fear. I could see the wheels turning in her head. She knew I wasn't bluffing. I'm calling the cops, I repeated firmly. I wasn't giving in, no matter how much they tried to manipulate me. They had already crossed a line by refusing to respect my boundaries, and I wasn't going to let them do it any further. I reached for my phone in my pocket, but before I could unlock it, my mom grabbed my arm. Her grip was tight, and I could feel the anger in her touch. You're making a huge mistake, Alex, she spat. You think you're better than us? You think you can just shut us out? You owe us. We did everything for you when you were little. How dare you turn your back on us like this? Her words hit me like a slap in the face. It was the same tired, guilt-tripping speech they'd given me time and time again, but now it felt more suffocating than ever. They had no right to manipulate me like this. I had worked hard to get to where I was, and I wasn't about to let them ruin that for me. I shoved her hand off my arm. No, you're the ones making a mistake. You think you can come in here, take over my house, and manipulate me into giving you a place to stay just because you feel entitled to it? No. My dad clenched his fists, his face turning redder with each word I said. If you do this, you'll regret it, he warned, his voice low and dangerous. You're destroying this family. You're going to be the one who's alone when we're gone. I felt a chill run down my spine, but I didn't flinch. I was done listening to threats. Goodbye, Dad, I said, and I quickly pulled my phone out, dialing the non-emergency line for the police. I could hear my parents arguing in the background as I waited for the line to connect. My dad was shouting now, demanding I open the door. You can't do this. You'll be sorry, Alex. We're your parents. But I didn't open the door. I didn't let their words affect me. I just focused on the phone call, waiting for the dispatcher to answer. 911. What's your emergency? I took a deep breath, trying to stay as calm as possible. Hi, I need to report a situation at my house. My parents are here, and they're trying to force their way into my home. They're making threats and refusing to leave. I've asked them to leave multiple times, and now they're being aggressive. The dispatcher's voice was professional and calm. Okay, sir, I understand. We'll send someone to your location. Stay on the line, and do not open the door unless you're certain it's law enforcement. I thanked the dispatcher, hanging up just as I heard my dad pounding on the door. His voice was muffled, but I could hear the fury in his words. You're going to regret this, Alex. You've just destroyed everything. But I was done. I wasn't going to give in to their manipulation anymore. I backed away from the door and took a few steps into the living room, my mind racing. I couldn't believe this was happening. I thought I was done with all the drama, but now it seemed like it was escalating faster than I could keep up with. A few minutes later, I heard sirens outside. My stomach twisted in knots, but I stayed put, waiting for the cops to arrive. When they finally pulled up, I felt a mix of relief and dread. This wasn't how I'd wanted things to go, but my parents weren't leaving me with any other choice. I opened the door just enough to let the officers inside. Please, take care of this, I said, my voice trembling with a mix of exhaustion and anger. The officers stepped in, immediately sizing up the situation. My parents were standing there, arms crossed, looking more defiant than ever. "You need to leave," one of the officers said firmly, his tone no nonsense. "We've been called here for a disturbance. You're not allowed to force your way into this home." My dad opened his mouth to argue, but the officer cut him off. "I suggest you leave now, or you'll be arrested for trespassing." The silence in the room was deafening. My mom looked at my dad, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of hesitation in her eyes. But it was short-lived. They weren't done yet. The officers stood firm, and after a long, tense stare-off, my parents seemed to realize that their manipulation tactics weren't going to work this time. They stood there for a moment, glaring at me, trying to figure out their next move. It was clear to me that they were frustrated, but also not ready to completely give up. I could hear my mom mumbling something under her breath as she backed away from the door. "This isn't over," she muttered. "You'll regret this, Alex. You'll see." She and my dad exchanged a few heated words as they turned to leave, their heads hanging in defeat. The officers gave them a final warning to stay off the property, and with that, they turned and left. For a moment, I thought maybe that was it, that the tension was finally over. But I should have known better. It wasn't long before I started seeing posts on social media. My phone buzzed repeatedly, each notification more explosive than the last. First, there was a post from my mom. Her profile picture was of our whole family when we were still close. She had a way of using old photos to tug at heartstrings. "So disappointed in my son today. I've given him everything, and this is how he repays me? I'm just a mother who's always been there for him. Is this the kind of child he's going to be? A selfish one? I don't know how he can sleep at night knowing he's throwing his own parents out on the street." The post had barely been up for a few minutes before the comments started rolling in. My mom's friends, a lot of them from her church group, chimed in with their sympathy. "Such a shame, Alex. You were raised better than this," one comment read. Another one said, "You're in my thoughts, Karen. A mother deserves better than this." Then, my dad posted something too. His tone was much more direct. "I raised that kid. I put a roof over his head, fed him, worked day and night to give him everything he has. And this is how he treats me? He'll come crawling back when he realizes what he's done. But I'm not sure I'll be here when he does." I felt the sting of his words, but it was nothing compared to the anger that followed. My phone started lighting up with messages. My siblings were texting me, asking what the hell was going on. My sister, Mia, was the first to reach out. "Alex, is everything okay?" she asked. "What's with all the posts from Mom and Dad? I've never seen them this upset." I ran my hands through my hair, trying to think of how to explain without sounding defensive. "Mia, they're lying. They're trying to make me look like the bad guy because I won't let them move into my house. They've done this before, manipulating me, using guilt to get what they want. I've had enough." She responded almost immediately, "But don't you think you should be helping them? You know, they did do a lot for you when you were younger. I get that they're asking a lot, but they're your parents." I stared at the message, my mind racing. I had already tried explaining to her, but I could tell it wasn't sinking in. I needed to talk to her face to face, but my parents had made their move online, spreading their narrative across every platform they could. As if on cue, my phone buzzed again, this time with a message from my aunt. She was one of the more reasonable people in the family. "Alex, I don't want to take sides, but I'm seeing these posts from your parents. It's hard to ignore. You've always been so independent, but don't you think it's a little harsh to throw them out like that? Are you sure there's no way you can work something out?" I let out a frustrated sigh. This was the last thing I needed right now. My parents had turned to social media to get the family involved, to pit them against me. They were making me look like the villain to everyone who would listen. I sat back down on the couch, rubbing my temples. I had to do something. I couldn't just let them spin this narrative without giving my side of the story. But what could I do? If I responded directly, I would just be playing into their game. If I stayed silent, the narrative would grow, and I'd be left trying to clean up the mess later. I stared at my phone, deciding I'd play it their way. I'd let them keep posting their angry rants online for now. But I knew this wasn't going to end until I made sure my side was heard too. The phone rang again, this time with a call from Mia. Her voice was tight when I picked up. "Alex, I don't know what's going on, but this is starting to look bad. People are starting to side with them. They're telling everyone you're being cruel. Even Grandma sent me a message saying you're not showing respect for them." I held my breath for a moment, trying to steady my voice. "I am showing respect, but I've had enough, Mia. This isn't about respect. This is about them manipulating me for years. They've crossed a line, and I'm not backing down." She hesitated, clearly torn. I'm not sure what to believe anymore, Alex. Maybe you should just let them stay for a little while, until things calm down. It doesn't have to be forever, right? I could feel my patience wearing thin. Mia, listen. If I give in now, it will never stop. You know how they are. This is about control, not family. I'm not giving them that power anymore. She didn't respond immediately, and I knew the conversation wasn't over. But in that moment, I felt a surge of clarity. I couldn't let my parents' social media posts determine my life. I would take control of my own narrative, one way or another. The notifications kept flooding in as I scrolled through my phone, but I knew that now wasn't the time to reply. I would make my stand, but on my terms. And soon, my parents would see that they couldn't manipulate me anymore. As the night wore on, I continued to watch as my parents flooded social media with their posts, trying to paint me as the villain. They posted pictures of themselves looking miserable, making passive-aggressive comments about how their son has abandoned them, trying to gather sympathy from anyone who would listen. I had had enough. I'd given them more than enough chances over the years to show that they could respect my boundaries, and they had continuously trampled over them. I wasn't going to let this cycle continue. Not now, not ever. The next day, I sat down and composed my response. I didn't care if it was going to upset some people. It was time to set the record straight. I took a deep breath and started typing. Let's set the record straight. Yes, I asked my parents not to move in. Why? Because they've repeatedly taken advantage of my kindness, made poor financial decisions, and always expected me to bail them out. I've given them my time, my money, and my patience for years. But the line was crossed when they tried to manipulate me into taking them in again, without ever changing their behavior. The truth is, it's not about helping them. It's about control. I've been working hard to build my own life, and I'm not going to let them undo everything just because they feel entitled to my success. This is not about disrespect, but about boundaries. I have a right to say no, and I'm not apologizing for it. To anyone who feels differently, maybe it's time you asked yourself why you're supporting this kind of behavior. I hesitated for a moment, but then hit post. Within minutes, comments started to roll in. Some of my family members, the ones who didn't know the full story, began posting their support for my parents. My aunt, the one who had asked about things earlier, even left a comment asking why I couldn't just let things go for a while. But I noticed the more honest, straightforward comments started to outweigh the manipulative ones. Then, I saw something I wasn't expecting. Mia commented. It was short, but it meant everything to me. I'm sorry, Alex. I get it now. I'll always have your back. You're doing the right thing. It hit me like a wave. Finally, someone understood. The posts from my parents came to an abrupt halt after that. For a while, it felt like they'd retreated into their own little world of bitterness. I didn't care. I had done what I had to do, and now the ball was in their court. They could keep playing their manipulative games, but I wasn't going to be a pawn in them anymore. A week later, I got a phone call from my mom. Her voice was quieter than usual, but the edge was still there. Alex, you don't know how much you've hurt me. I thought you'd always be there for me, and now you've turned your back on me. I paused for a moment. I had no desire to get dragged back into her guilt trips, so I said simply, No, Mom. You don't get to control me anymore. I'm not turning my back on you, but I'm setting boundaries, and I expect you to respect them. If you need help, I'll be here, but on my terms. I won't keep letting you manipulate me into thinking that you're the only one who matters. There was silence on the other end, and I knew she wasn't happy, but for once, it felt like I had the power. They never did come back to my house after that. The social media posts eventually stopped as well. It wasn't easy, but I realized that standing up for myself was the most important thing I could do. No amount of guilt or manipulation could change that. I was done being their doormat, and the world didn't end because of it. And just like that, I reclaimed control over my life. My parents learned a hard lesson that day, one that I had been trying to teach them for years. Family can be complicated, but sometimes you have to draw a line in the sand and say, enough is enough. They didn't change overnight, but I did, and that's what mattered.